Planning Board of East Hampton. You're live on the air and you're being recorded.
Thanks very much. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the East Hampton Town Planning Board. It's August 4th, 2021. We have a number of matters on for subdivision review, sub-waiver review, site plan review, a couple of zone change matters, and also at 7 p.m. we have 3 public hearings scheduled. We will commence our first matter and we'll see if we get cleared at 7 o'clock. If we don't really have any other works, any regular meeting matters, so we may have to start our next matter and then go to the public hearings after that's done. So the first matter on the agenda is a subdivision review for Wren's Nursery 2. Is the applicant? There you are. Thank you. Okay, so we can get started. We have Kathy as the board's rep on that matter. Eric, you're on.
Sure. This is a final subdivision application to create a 3-lot open space subdivision at a site in East Hampton known as Groundworks or Wren's Nursery formerly. The proposal is to create an agricultural reserve area utilized for storing and cultivating plants adjacent to a lot to contain a pre-existing non-conforming garden center, as well as 2 vacant residential lots. The parcel is zoned a residence and is situated between Montauk Highway and Hampton Road. Hopefully you can see the screen. There we go. That's the subdivision map. This is an unlisted action. The planning board made a negative declaration as part of the preliminary subdivision approval, which was granted in 2017. It appears that the applicants have met most of the conditions of the preliminary subdivision approval. We will need final road grading and drainage plans, and these should be reviewed by a consulting engineer. The applicants are proposing, unfortunately, this is a little blurry here, but the applicants are proposing, and I'll show you on the map here. We can get our, no, we don't have our, there we go. I think that's it. Nope, that's freehand. That's what I wanted. Okay, so these are the 2 residential lots in the south. They currently have some structures from the garden center business. Those are to be removed, and these are to be vacant residential lots. This is the garden center. Again, this is a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's zoned A residence. And then this here would be the agricultural reserved area, which would be used for cultivating and storing plants. This was a key question during the preliminary review as to whether or not the agricultural reserved area could be used for such a function. It's not common. Most of the time it's actively farmed. And also it was a question as to whether or not that business was allowed to remain. I attached documentation from the preliminary review, and it was determined during the course of that stage of review that that is allowable. However, and again, this is a final subdivision. This is basically just the cleanup elements, but we felt remiss at not reminding you of that because, as I said in the beginning, the preliminary approval was in 2017. It was some time ago. The applicant submitted a copy of covenants and restrictions which were required by the health department. However, they have not submitted a draft declaration of covenants and restrictions for the subdivision conditions. Those are enumerated in the preliminary approval. A draft declaration of covenants and restrictions should be submitted to be reviewed by council. There's a number of map notations that appear odd and unnecessary, and unfortunately, for some reason, this is coming up blurry, but there's map notations here about lot coverage, here about sanitary calculations, and then there's general notes down here. I listed in the memo, there seem to be some notes that are somewhat superfluous, and the sanitary calculations have a breakdown of the existing uses here. I understand that that was a requirement of the health department. However, it doesn't make sense to have notations about existing uses on a subdivision map. That would necessitate that if they came in the future for site plan review, that they'd have to amend the map. There's some other notations there that seem to not make sense. They have all of the notations that are required. There's also one error over here. Again, you can't really tell because of the blurriness there. But I believe the applicant's attorney can address those notations individually, and we've spoken about that. So I think that takes care of that. The fire department reaffirmed that that there's adequate water supply and that the access is sufficient. Public hearing was held at the preliminary stage for this in 2016. We included the wrap-up memo that the planning department had prepared at that time, which lists the public's comments. Most of the public's comments, and I apologize, I probably should have started with a aerial view of where we are. I'm going to have to erase some stuff. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So again, this is the parcel. This is the junction of Montauk Highway and Hampton Road. Access for another big thing that came up in the preliminary was separating the commercial activities from the residential activities and protecting, namely to protect the residents on Eileen's Path. That is a residential neighborhood. Again, this is entirely surrounded by residential zoning and residential property with the exception of this parcel here, which is actually zoned multifamily. It's one of the only ones in town. But basically the idea, this is Eileen's Path, oops. This is Eileen's Path right here, which ends in a cul-de-sac. And then there's a lot here. It's actually a tax map parcel that is a tap street that was created as part of a previous subdivision that provides access to this parcel. The applicant submitted a deed indicating that they own that as well. It's not a right of way. It's actually a property. The common driveway, again, I could go back to the map, is the common driveway for the two residential lots is to come off of Eileen's Path. Again, for basically those two residential lots. And then the garden center business here is to maintain access off of Montauk Highway. That was really the main concern that the public had, was the potential for the fact that if this garden center business is going to continue, and if the ag reserve is going to have plants coming in and out of it, that be separated from the residential neighborhood.
What's going to give them the legal right, the residents, residential lots, what's going to give them the legal right to use that tap street?
Well, they own it.
And it's going to be dedicated to the resident, to those two
It would have to be.
lots.
Yeah, it would have to be. I mean, the applicant's attorney might speak to that as well. But basically, that was the majority of the public comments. The planning board is not required to hold a second public hearing for the final stage of review for a subdivision. You usually don't, especially when the map is not substantively different from what was approved at the preliminary stage. It doesn't appear that it is in this case. So we would recommend that you do, in fact, waive it. So with that noted, I'll just share screen again to put the subdivision map up. Hopefully it's a little less blurry now. I will. So basically, there's some map notations and revisions that need to be made. The board should probably discuss the specific covenants and restrictions that would be included in that declaration, so that a draft of the document can be prepared. I should have mentioned also an agricultural easement. That document draft should be prepared and submitted. But otherwise, the map appears basically in conformance with what was approved in the preliminary. And the board should discuss whether or not you will require a second public hearing.
Thank you very much. The applicant wish to adjourn.
Good evening, board members. Alice Cooley of Matthews Carson Cooley on behalf of the applicant. Believe it or not, we actually have been working diligently on this subdivision for the last 4 years since we received preliminary approval. Our two big hurdles were obtaining ownership of that tap street so we could have legal access, which is now in common ownership with the map. And also, it was quite difficult to get through the health department process, which I won't bore you with, but because it was a combination commercial site and residential lots, it required 2 levels of approval. In terms of the map notations, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and also 14, we did confirm with the health department today that those can come off the map. They're not going to require us to keep them on there. In terms of note 13, we actually put that on there because the prior town engineer, Tom Talmadge, did determine that we didn't need road and drainage plans on this. We're happy to submit them now. We don't have an objection to doing that, but we'll take that note off and we can get those plans submitted. We're also going to remove note 14. The county doesn't have an objection to that. And the coverage calculations and parking for lot one, that was just a mistake. That was part of our site plan application, which we had also done in 2016. In terms of the calculations for the sanitary flow, the county is requiring that we keep those on there. We had to, because of the size of the commercial site, we had to allocate some of the density of the residential lots to the commercial lot. So they want all future lot owners to be aware that each of those residential lots only has 300 gallons per day of allowable flow, just in case in a crazy world there was a zone change and someone's permitted to perhaps put, a retail site, something like that on the property. They want future owners to know those gallons per day are restricted. And I think that's the extent of my comments, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Is that 300 gallons a day, the ag reserve is stripped of all flow, right?
Yes.
And that goes to
Yes.
the commercial lot?
Correct.
Okay.
Kathy, this is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. That answered most of my questions. So that was great. I'm glad that you'll be submitting the drainage because I think we need that. I understand that Tom, 5 years, 6, when however long ago it was that Tom took a look at it, but we don't have the benefit of his in-house review any longer. So I think it'd be great if you could submit the engineering for the drainage. The Tap Street, when we had the public hearing, this before many of the members of this board were even on this board, but Ian and I are the old salts here. There was some concern by the neighbors about the commercial traffic, and it was requested at the time, the applicant, and I guess it was you that was, I can't.
It was me.
Remember, sorry. But in the wrap-up memo, Joanne Powell wrote that the concern raised over the potential impact from the use of this Tap Street and Eileen's Path by commercial traffic from the nursery, specifically trucks from the nursery business, requested that it be put in writing that commercial traffic would not utilize Eileen's Path. And at the time you agreed to put that in the CNRs. I didn't see him there, even though it did say that the Tap Street was used only for the residences, but it didn't specifically bar the commercial traffic. So I wondered if you could include that in the CNRs.
Absolutely.
That'd be
I
great.
think that makes sense.
Okay, that's my only comment. And I'm sorry for you. I'm sure COVID didn't do a thing to help an already laborious process, but I think I'm happy to waive the hearing. I don't think there's any reason to read it.
Thank you.
Just one question, the ownership of the Tap Street, how's that going to take place?
So we were actually deeded, fee title to the Tap Street.
And that's going to pass on to the residential lots?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of different ways we can handle it. I think we can grant an easement, or, if the town were so inclined, we could dedicate it. Eileen's Path is dedicated. I'd have to discuss it with my client because we haven't actually had that discussion yet, but I don't see why that would be an issue.
Right, so does anyone have any other questions or comments on this?
I do actually. You just said something about the Suffolk County, the flow, and 100% has been removed from the ag reserve.
Correct.
That raises a little bit of an issue for me because I think if it's to be used for ag, and that there's a flow rating for that as well.
We were required to make it zero, to make it an undeveloped parcel.
And it's not related because you need more flow on the other properties.
No, we don't. We actually don't need more flow.
Huh.
That's really.
Yeah, it's a little problematic in that, I was in favor of, the view that was taken by the town that we could create a 1 acre ag reserve because it sort of makes sense in this case. But I think the previous board was concerned that, that's for cultivating or storage of plant material, not just an extension of the garden center. I don't know the exact details about the county and flow, but if you use something for ag actively, I think it has a flow. So it seems weird as a town that we would create a ag reserve that can't be used for ag.
Sure. Well, I can certainly bring that question to the engineer, but it's my understanding that we did not need flow in order to irrigate.
Yeah, I did not expect to have that question until coming into tonight.
You just a point on that. So sometimes the health department says that agriculture is, they consider it an industrial use. And so the act of conducting agriculture on that piece uses all the flow that would be available. So I don't want to get that confused with the idea of transferring flow to another piece.
Well, is that what's happening? Is it being transferred or is it being deemed zero?
It was transferred
Oh, what's
That just seems odd. to me.
so that we can't have density on that site. So it can't be improved.
But they consider agriculture uses flow. Ian's right. It's considered an industrial use that uses up all the flow from the site. And we gotta clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to put anybody on the spot or throw any,
Well, I wish I knew more about it.
Yeah, well, that's just saying.
Ask the engineer.
Let's just look into it, because I would want to make sure that like the county, town, by all standards, that you can use this acre for ag, because I think the concern was that, at least some concern was expressed that it wouldn't be used for ag. And if we're creating a lot that literally can't be used, I think that that's problematic, or could be.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, but I'm happy to.
Great.
Yeah, we just affirm
Yeah.
It makes sense that it wouldn't be.
So we'll put that down in our memo to you.
Right.
That you'll get us responses to that.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, I'm fully supportive. I don't think there needs to be a public hearing. Just that one issue.
This is about the common driveway. Does anyone, before I go to the questions quickly, does anyone have any further comment on that?
Along with Ian, I was looking at the ag aspect of this. And I guess now we're sending ag easements to the ag committee. We're going to use that new form. There's a new boilerplate ag easement form. Do we get comments from the ag committee on this one? Or maybe that was. No, on this subdivision, it's probably pre the code revision. But now that we're having a final approval, maybe we do want the ag committee.
What's that?
Already? Didn't you do-
Just because it was.
I think this was before, well, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I can't recall that happening during a preliminary. I don't think.
Well, there was a time, the ag committee's fairly recent, and then there was a time where we weren't actively referring things.
Yeah.
Well, they grandfathered into the old way of doing things?
I think it's procedural more than it is.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I think it's a good idea for a referral, and I also think it's a good idea for us not to wait to hear back in case we don't. I think that it can move forward, and it's,
Yeah, now
I want to
the
bring
time
it
for
up.
us to get a referral from them.
I think that was the whole idea, is to give them an opportunity so we can get more information, but not hold anything up
Mhm.
by waiting for a board that doesn't meet very frequently.
So are we going to refer it to them or?
I would vote yes. I don't see any downside to it, but again, I don't think that it should stop.
It's going to hold them up.
Well, no, it doesn't. We can refer it, and if we get an answer for the next time we meet, we have an answer, and if we don't, we don't.
Okay.
That's the way I've always advocated, and I think that's the way that our policy is.
We all agree on that?
Yeah.
To me.
Because I don't want that.
I don't want to hold them up to there.
To Randy's point, though, about the easement, the ag committee and this board and other, town agencies spend a lot of time reworking that boilerplate form. I think for a case like this, though, we have to make sure it fits with your use. So I think it would be productive, and I defer to council on this, if we have made the practice of looking at reserves, even though the town board is the one that, or easements rather, the town board is the one that adopts them. We've made the point of looking at it to make sure it meshes with our approval. So I think if it were possible to have that and see what the edits are, so we know how we differ from something that took years to develop and sort of become acceptable to everybody, it'd be nice. And I think that'd be a really good procedure, so we know exactly what words were changed or.
Yeah, okay.
You don't have to answer that right now, but there was a lot of back and forth about, since the town board accepts easements, but weren't aware of the full process here. And we ended up with ag easements that didn't always mesh with the intention of the planning board.
Right.
So I think a great process would be to take that boilerplate document, which obviously has to be altered on a case by case basis, but identify those, differences and make sure that it fits.
Yeah, one difference is this one requires that ag reserve not be sold separately from the adjoining parcel, right? It's unusual that I don't really have any.
Well, it's that, and there's things about storage that were written in specifically to the covenants to make sure that, you know, it's regular in an ag reserve that you can park stuff and store stuff, but it's not typically a very small piece attached to someplace else for that activity happens. So like, you know, there are things that have to be changed, but I think the starting point should be that standard document, and then if we could just know what was changed. And
Yeah,
make sure
that's a
that's
good
there.
point.
Is that all right with you?
So I just want to be clear, I'm understanding what you're saying. I'm not sure I have your new template. I have the old template certainly, and I think some of the language would need to change. So do you want me to start with the old template
No,
and
the
then
new.
correct my changes?
Well, that's why.
Well, new, it's not even
No.
that new anymore. It's probably 4 years old. So,
But I think we want you to use the new template.
Okay,
Four-year-old template.
I'll figure out which one it is and I'll send it to you.
And this-
I mean, that's how we do pretty much anything anyway, start with the template.
right, it goes back to John Jilnicki, and I think that it was instituted that would be what you received. So new might be an old person term.
This one has the affirmative request that the land be used for agriculture.
Right.
I mean,
No,
the-
there's-
No?
the affirmative part, we debated that for a long time, and it wasn't, well, my recollection was we weren't allowed to have an affirmative farming. That was an additional right that you couldn't, you know, before, not through this
Yeah.
process.
or on any easement or covenant that on any application, I'd review it and check and make sure that whatever conditions are in the approval match what's in the easement or covenant before it goes, you know, to the town board or wherever. So.
Well, I guess just if you could ask John, just to say, hey, there was, you know, the ag easement reworked, is this the one we're using this?
Right.
Is there language now that you can't let the land lie fallow?
That
No.
would be the purchase of.
That's what Randy is saying. There was talk about it, but no, that was not part of the.
One thought, Ian, quickly, is in that virtually all other ag reserve areas, and I remember when this was set up, they were, unlike any other reserve areas, they're allowed to be bought and sold by individuals. You're allowed to have a deed to your reserve area. All other reserve areas have to either be held by the town or a not-for-profit.
Mhm.
And in this case, we're saying you can't sell this separately, but I think it'd be a good idea if we would allow it to be leased. In other words, we don't want to do anything that prevents this nursery from leasing that ag reserve to somebody to grow nursery
Well, I
stuff.
don't know if that's their intention at all.
No, but I mean, I'm not saying it's
He's just saying
affirmative.
we should.
I don't disagree in principle,
We shouldn't
Randy, but there's
obstruct it,
that
yeah.
minimum 2 acre rule that we got around because not got around, but it was a legal opinion that because they owned the lot next to it, that the owner had 2 acres in total, and that would allow this to be a reserve.
Right.
Whereas 1 acre is less than,
But it's still owned by one person.
yeah, we would need a legal opinion. I don't disagree in spirit.
What would prevent it from being leased by the owner to someone else?
I
Well,
just want to make sure that when we say it can't be sold separately, we don't make it impossible to lease separately.
He's trying to give flexibility to the use of the property.
Yes.
For the purposes of agriculture.
keep in mind, this was a bit of a unique situation, and everything was pretty much crafted very specifically to these situations on this property. So it wasn't a very standard agricultural reserve where you're expecting that someone's going to be actively farming it. The whole idea was that the ag reserve and the garden center business, you couldn't, again, separate the lots, that, you know, that the ag reserve was going to be for the storage of plants and, you know, landscaping materials. And then the business activities were going to occur around the garden center. I think if you are, and that's what the conditions from the preliminary outline got towards. I think if you are going to change this to where there is a possibility that someone's going to actively farm that land, and keep in mind too, this is not prime agricultural soils over here. You're significantly altering this subdivision from what the preliminary approval had in that. And I mean, consider also that, you know, if you are actively farming a parcel, a big part of the public comments was about potential disturbance to the neighboring residential properties. You have a lot of small residential lots surrounding this. Obviously tractors, dust, things of that sort. It changes this.
But it was written in cultivation or storage, and cultivation is farming.
True,
I think it was intended that they could grow trees that they would then sell, or they could store and take care for trees that they then sell. So I think leaving it exactly as is.
Yeah, well, let's see
Okay.
what, let's see
Yeah,
what Thomas comes up with.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to leave it as, especially because it was already done. And let's just wrap up these questions because we're gonna have a little bit of time. And I'm gonna move things around on this calendar because we have these 3 public hearings on. So is there any, we all agree that the final grading and drainage for the driveway should be submitted?
Yep.
No doubt about that. Map notation should be amended, and the only real, what we need to make sure, do we all agree that the public hearing should be waived
Yes.
all around?
Same.
Very good.
One other comment, I'm not saying to hold it up for this, but we've gotten more attentive to the fact that people are parking in the right of way of the county or the state. I believe the parking for the site is in the state right of way.
It is partially, mostly.
So
Well,
I think that was addressed in site plan, which still hasn't been finalized and approved, so
it's just, it's,
something to think about.
yeah.
but we're kind of past that. All right, we have 5 minutes now. We've got 3 matters on, so we'll get you a letter and you'll work out with Thomas the specific.
Thank
Probably
you.
do other 80.
I was gonna suggest exactly that. Let's do, we have a wrap-up menu. That's it. We have a wrap-up memo, get the word out. We have one of those for 80s Firestone. So why don't we do that? And we're gonna move Donald Robertson sub-waiver after the public hearing. So hopefully we'll, if there are folks here for the public hearings, I want them to be able to come in, be heard, and then we'll move on. Go ahead.
Sure. Sorry, just trying to get back here and stop screen sharing.
Luke, you're on this. Is the applicant here on 80 Firestone?
I can be.
You, okay.
Yeah, and I spoke to Joel actually, and I gave him the Zoom link and the phone number. And I think he might, I mean, Mike LTV, is anyone trying to zoom in?
In the past, there's a
No,
guy,
excuse me, there's nobody trying to zoom in.
if the past there's a guide, I suspect that there might not be that much interest in comment by the.
We did discuss it though. So a public hearing was held. No members of the public spoke at the hearing. We did receive one written comment. The letter objects to the issuance of the permit for the, and expresses concern regarding the redevelopment of the property and changes to the character of the neighborhood, the potential impact from traffic, changes to views from across Fleming Road, and impacts to the bluff resulting from construction of a staircase to the shoreline. The planning department notes that the number of units is not increasing and that the project complies with zoning, with the exception of the fact that resort units were not designed in multi-unit buildings, which they did receive a variance for. The property is zoned resort and the proposed use is resort, which is a permitted use, especially permitted use, and is also legally pre-existing on the property. No expansion in the number of units is proposed and no significant additional traffic, if any, is anticipated. The zoning board and planning boards both required a reduction in clearing along the shoreline and required revegetation of land seaward of the coastal erosion hazard area boundary. Clearing of the bluff face for the construction of the staircase is limited to 20 feet in width and requires revegetation with American beach grass. However, the planning board should review the public's comments and concerns and determine if they've been adequately addressed. The fire marshal's office has signed off on the application. We note that there actually is a water main and a fire hydrant about 150 feet away from the edge of this property. The zoning board of appeals, as I previously said, granted the necessary relief, which was due to the fact that these are single unit buildings. They're not multi-unit buildings. The planning board made a negative declaration under SECRA, and this has been referred to the planning commission. They're given 30 days to respond. We sent it about, I think, 24 days ago. And they haven't commented yet. I suspect this was actually sent when the NRSP and variance application was reviewed too, but I actually wasn't able to find any response from them. So we played it safe and referred it again.
Excuse me, board, I apologize for interrupting. There's Joel's Halsey's in the waiting room for Zoom. Should he be admitted in?
Bring him on in.
Almost done anyway, so.
Okay,
In
just a
conclusion,
second.
oh yeah. And this has been referred to the planning commission.
Excuse me, Joel, welcome to the meeting. Could you just mute the broadcast in your home and only listen to the Zoom itself?
And they haven't commented yet.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Just a second. You're here. You can part of the meeting. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. So in conclusion, the board should review the published comments and determine if they've been adequately addressed. And if they have, then the application will be ready for approval once we receive a response from the planning commission, or provided they don't respond within the 30 days.
All right, Mr. Halsey, do you have anything that you would like to add to our consumption?
No, I just wanted to be present because I know the letter was submitted, and I was, if you had any questions with regards to the letter, I'd be happy to answer them.
Very well. Thank you.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think everything's set to go. So I know Randy had a point. I don't know if you want to bring that up about the road. I'm not sure I understand your.
Well, sometimes when there's a private road providing access, it creates an issue with emergency vehicle passage, because you don't know if the road's going to be plowed. You don't know if the road's going to be maintained well. So I don't know that we discussed that on this one, but one of the comments from the neighbor was that it's on an unimproved private road. That's how this site accesses. And we haven't made any provision for the maintenance or,
Yeah, access, right.
What about the fact that the number of units is not increasing? That is,
I don't think it matters. So we're approving a new
But it was
commercial use.
given to fire department and all of
Yeah.
that, right?
I don't know. Did you see my email?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
Okay. Actually, I should maybe I can screen share here. You're right. And a lot of times with the site plan, if you do have an unimproved road or something like that, it will be required that it be improved, but other changes, drainage, things like that. You have to do that for a subdivision. You have to provide legal access that is of a certain dimension and design. You don't necessarily have to do that for a site plan, as long as there is a 20-foot wide minimum unobstructed width for emergency services, then that's sufficient. Again, the fire marshal reviewed this just recently in May and signed off on it. They are extending water service to the property, but the nearest water main is actually about 150 feet away, and there's actually a hydrant right on the corner. There's actually a bend, and then this property is right there. Maybe I can show it to you real quick. But so yeah, you don't have to. The only thing in the code, as far as I know, that's absolutely required is that you have a minimum 20-foot wide unobstructed width to the property. You don't have to have provisions for the maintenance of the road or things like that. You do absolutely if it's a subdivision. But in this case, if the, well, I guess the town engineer probably reviewed this in its early stages, but if the engineer and the fire marshal and the fire department say that it's adequate, there's nothing that absolutely requires you to do it.
Eric, it says a 20-foot unobstructed, what? Is it? It doesn't say anything about improved, unimproved,
No.
cleared.
No, because I mean, you think about it, residences and certain properties, you'd have, you don't want impervious material like asphalt, and you'd require them to have gravel driveways. I mean, that's essentially what that extension of Firestone is. I'll show you real quick on the aerial. I know we're getting into 7 o'clock here, just to show you. So it's a little tough to see here. It's a little tough to see the water main, but this is the property. And for some reason in this part of town, the lot lines don't match up on the aerial very well. It's just a weird thing. So this is actually the, should work. That's the existing water main right now. And this actually right here, because I'm sure you can't see it, right there is a fire hydrant. So
That's a town improved town road, the blue Fleming.
yes, yeah, Fleming.
tell me what Fleming Road is.
Fleming Road, basically you could follow this blue line. That's Fleming, although this is the junction where Firestone, which goes this way and ultimately ends, where Fleming comes in. Firestone goes up here, starting here, about right near the edge of this property. This is basically gravel. It's sort of a dirt road, but Fleming is asphalt.
How far from Fleming to the edge of the property?
About 150 feet. The distance, I scaled it out this morning, and the distance from the hydrant to the edge of the property was basically exactly 150 feet.
And the buildings are going to be, what the project calls for the buildings to come down and
Yeah, totally.
taller buildings to go in.
I'm sorry?
And newer, taller buildings to go in.
Correct, although not significantly taller.
They're the same before,
Yeah.
and they're a little more separate.
Yeah, no,
They're
that I
basically the
recall.
same, configuration.
All right.
I
Just-
don't think it'd be unreasonable for us to ask that there be a requirement that access from Fleming Road to the site be maintained such that emergency vehicles can use it.
What does that mean, maintain?
Whatever, I don't know how vague we want to be, but it means that you got to plow it, you got to grade it.
Well, don't you think they want to keep it maintained in order for the people who use
Yes.
the property?
I do.
Do you think that would not be sufficient?
Well, we don't do that with other private roads. We say you have to do it. You have to improve it.
Right, but
We're
in this,
not even asking to improve it here. We're just asking to maintain it.
so in this case, we would be asking, we couldn't demand it. It's like
I
Eric
don't know,
said,
that's up to the attorney.
Yeah, well, I think Randy's suggesting that the condition of approval be that, I mean, that's what I'm hearing you say, is that the access to Firestone Road from Fleming be maintained and maintained, if he's saying it's plowed or graded or, for emergency access. I don't think it's an unreasonable, and I think there's an enlightened self-interest there that the applicant would probably do it anyway, but I think it's a matter of course for this board. It's consistent with what we've asked other people to do.
I don't know if it's a question for tonight, though.
Yeah, I understand.
Right
Yeah.
now, the only issue before us, and the reason we're doing it out of order, I guess, is because we only have one issue to deal with, is whether the application's ready for approvals once we get Suffolk County Planning Commission comments.
Well, then it is relevant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, because.
If not now, when, that said, I don't think it's necessary.
I would point out too, just that if there is going to be anything, a condition or anything else that these property owners are required to maintain in perpetuity, the probably very questionable and involved and ambiguous ownership rights of the other people on that private road would probably come into play. I know this area of town is.
They don't own it on their own.
Yeah. So I mean, even though you couldn't imagine that somebody wouldn't want them to improve the road and maintain it and plow it, the comments you got from the neighbor were that they don't like change, in
Well,
a sense. So I think that they would want to have a say in that. So, that being said, before you put a condition on them, you'd have to know who has ownership rights of that road, who has responsibility.
I think it raises a lot of questions, and it's.
Well, presumably the owner of this property has rights.
No, can I speak?
I don't know.
Go.
Joel?
Go.
Sorry, I didn't know you guys, I thought I was muted. The ownership of this road, there is nobody, it was 511 equity. 511 equities is no longer in existence, and there is no, you can't abandon the road. You can't find anybody to sign off on an abandonment for the road. When we were running the water line to this road, it was almost impossible to go through Suffolk County because there was no ownership of the road. The road is essentially, it's private, but it's owned by nobody.
It's orphaned.
Well, look, I think it's just a question of how many people do we think this is even necessary?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
and I think the only one who's really going to benefit or be hindered is the applicant themselves. So, does anybody disagree that the application is ready for approval once comments from the Suffolk County Planning Commission have been received? Anyone?
I think it's ready.
Ready? All around?
Yes.
All right. That concludes that. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night. All right, folks, thank you for your patience. We have, as I mentioned earlier, 3 public hearings on for 7 p.m. We'll do them the following order. First is going to be Lucilla D'Agostino's Artist Studio application. That's Eric is going to speak on that. And Ed, that's yours.
There, I got mine.
The Elizabeth Marin Artist Studio, Eric will also speak on that. And Sharon, that's yours. And the Handling South Sub waiver, Will be speaking on that, and Kathy, that's yours. So with that, Ed, hope your voice is in good shape. All right, Ed.
Take notice that a public hearing will be held before the East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, today, Wednesday, August 4th, 2021, at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter, as this matter may be heard, to consider the application of Lucilla D'Agostino Artist Studio approval pursuant to Article 11 of Chapter 255 of the East Hampton Town Code to permit interior alterations in an existing artist studio, which will increase the gross floor area. How much of this do I really need to read? The whole thing? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I thought Eric might be going over some of these details. The artist studio was originally approved in 2008 and consists of two 8 by 40 foot shipping containers, 640 square feet. The artist studio is situated on a concrete foundation with a partially improved basement, totaling 402 square feet of gross floor area, bringing the total gross floor area to 1,042 square feet. The property contains 79,295 square feet, 1.8 acres, and is located at 38 Red Dirt Road, Springs, and are situated in an A1 residence zoning district as shown on the official zoning map of the town of East Hampton. They are identified on the Suffolk County tax map as parcel 300-103-8-28. The Lucilla D'Agostino Artist Studio file is available for inspection at the Planning Board offices, 300 Panago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton. The hearing will remain open for a period of 7 days until August 11th, 2021, for the purpose of receiving written comments. Written comments may be submitted by email directed to the Planning Board at ehamptonny.gov and by mail to 300 Panago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, 11937, and received on or before close of business August 11th, 2021. Please check the town's website, ehamptonny.gov, for updated information regarding hearing procedures. Dated July 7th, 2021, Samuel Cranford, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Okay, you can see the aerial now.
Right.
I've read the affidavit of service and posting, and it appears the notice is sufficient.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. You can see on the aerial photograph here, this is Red Dirt Road. In the south here, this is where it intersects with Old Stone Highway. Obviously, the property is highlighted here. The artist studio itself is already existing. It consists of two steel shipping containers that were connected to each other. The applicant is proposing some interior alterations, as well as the fact, well, it also requires your approval due to the fact that there is now a new owner, and I will just screen share to show you the the elevation plans showing the artist studio there. We have a floor plan, site plan, a survey of the property, as well as the aerial. And if anyone from the public needs me to help them with the visuals, I'm glad to help. But that's basically the application.
Very well. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak with respect to this application, this public hearing, Lucilla D'Agostino's Artist Studio? Hearing none, we don't need a motion because we have the matter, it remains open for public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, if the
So
applicant's here.
Right, but we don't need to make a motion to close it.
No, I would just.
For the public for the spoken part, right?
Right, I would just, but if the applicant's here and has any comments,
Does the applicant wish to speak?
Yes, please.
Go right ahead.
Good evening, board members. John Huber of Dayton, Voorhees, and Balsam here in East Hampton, attorney for the applicants. Thank you for your time. We have no further comments. we're happy to respond to any written submissions that occur by August 11th.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, the spoken portion of the public hearing will be closed. And again, as noted previously, the public is free to submit written comments within the next 7 days.
And you have received one public comment, just so you know, written comment.
Supportive, I believe. So, okay, the next is the Elizabeth Marin Artist Studio. And again, Eric, that's yours. Yep.
So take notice that a public hearing will be held before the East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall, 159 Cantiga Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, August 4th, 2021 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter, as this matter may be heard. Consider the application of Elizabeth Marin Artist Studio approval pursuant to Article 11 of Chapter 255 of East Hampton Town Code to convert a 448.8 square foot, one-story garage into an artist studio. The property is currently approved with a 2-story single-family residence and associated accessory structures. The property contains 16,913 square feet, which is 0.39 acre, and is located at 16 Skellinger Road, Amagansett, and is situated in A residence zoning district as shown on the official zoning map of the town of East Hampton, and are identified on the Suffolk County tax map as parcels 300-168-6-4. The Elizabeth Marin studio file is available for inspection at the Planning Board offices, 300 Cantiga Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York. The hearing will remain open for a period of 7 days until August 11th, 2021, for the purpose of receiving written comments. Written comments may be submitted by email directed to planningboard@easthamptonny.gov and by mail to 300 Cantiga Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York 11937. And received on or before close of business August 11, 2021. Please check the town's website at easthamptonny.gov for updated information regarding hearing procedures. Dated July 7, 2021, Samuel Kramer, Chairman.
Thanks, Sharon. Thomas?
I've reviewed the affidavit of service and posting, and I find the notices adequate.
Very well. Yes.
Trying to work the, so this is the location of the property, obviously, highlighted here. This is Abraham's Path, coming up, crossing the train tracks where it intersects with Town Lane. This is Montauk Highway down here. Just to give you some reference, I zoomed out far enough so you can see the ball fields here. I'll zoom in a little bit just to show you the property. Just like with the last artist studio application, this proposes to utilize an existing structure. That structure, it's a little bit difficult to see because of the tree cover, but it is currently a garage that is situated right here at the end of, this is the driveway as you come in. This is obviously the residence. The applicants are not proposing to alter the dimensions of the structure. And I do also have the elevation plans for this application, which I'll show you now. But other than that, I think the public hearing notice pretty much covers it, and we have not received any written comment on this application so far.
Are there any members of the public who wish to be heard with respect to the Elizabeth Marin, apologize if I mispronounced that, artist studio? Is the applicant here? Do you wish to be heard?
I just have one question.
You should come to the point.
Podium, what is your name?
Good evening. My only question is if you acknowledge the letter of support that I received from my adjacent neighbor.
Oh, yes, I should have mentioned that. With all artist studio applications, a requirement of the town code is that letters of support from, I think if I remember correctly, I think you submitted more. It's either 3 or 5, I forget, but it is codified. The artist is required to submit letters of support. So, recognizing them as an artist and.
Oh, this wasn't a public hearing.
No. No.
No,
That's what she's referring to. I'm just reiterating that.
So what I'm referring to is the letter from the neighbor, the email.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
part of
Yeah,
the
I'm
packet.
sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble keeping track of. The applicant is absolutely correct. There was a letter submitted from the immediately adjoining neighbor closest to the existing structure and the proposed orders to go in support of the application.
Thank you.
Okay, then with that, the public comments portion of the spoken comment portion of the public hearing will be closed, and the public record, the written comment remains open for 7 minutes. Thank you very much. Finally, we have the Hand Lane South sub-waiver, and Will, that will be yours. Go ahead.
Take notice of the public hearing will be held for the East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall, 159 Canada Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, August 4th, 2021 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard to consider the application of Hand Lane South minor subdivision approval pursuant to Chapter 220, subdivision of land in the East Hampton Town Code to divide 43,704 square foot, 1.0033 acres parcel into 2 lots. Proposed lot 1 will contain 21,223 square feet. Proposed lot 2 will contain 22,462 square feet. Common driveway is also proposed. The property is located on the eastern side of Hand Lane and Amagansett, and are situated in a V residence zoning district as shown on the official zoning map of the town of East Hampton and identified in the Suffolk tax map as parcels number 300-172-3-20. Subject application is classified as an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, Article 27 in the New York Code of Rules and Regulations, and Chapter 128, Environmental Quality Review of the Town Code. A survey prepared by George Wolfridge Surveyors, PC, dated January 19th, 2021, and a subdivision map prepared by Stephen Barilski, dated revised May 18th, 2021, are available for inspection at the planning board offices, 300 Panago Place, 103 East Hampton, New York. The hearing will remain open for a period of 7 days until August 11th, 2021, for the purpose of receiving written comments. Written comments may be submitted by email directed to planningboard@ehamptonny.gov and by mail to 300 Panago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York, 11937, and received on or before close of business, August 11, 2021. Please check the town's website at https://easthamptonny.gov / for updated information regarding hearing procedures. Dated July 7th, 2021, Samuel Kramer, Chairman.
Thanks very much. Thomas, how are we for jurisdiction?
I've reviewed the affidavit of service and posting, and I find the notice is adequate.
Thanks very much. Well,
I'm getting kind of up for it, sorry.
so it's 1 acre.
Well, but
Soon.
Yeah, I got it, but just, how do I screen share? I haven't done that.
yeah, you're all, yeah, that's I figured there'd be be a little different than.
Okay, so yeah, you can basically see the property here. This is Hand Lane South, right? This is Hand Lane right here. And the application was to, there's an existing property and an existing driveway. The plan was to subdivide that property so that there could be 2 new residential properties put on the site, and to construct a new common driveway easement, as you can see here, that would allow both lots to have their own access points. And I think yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we did receive public comments on this, didn't we? Yeah.
I don't recall. We could look into that.
Yeah.
Very well. Okay, so does any member of the public wish to speak with respect to this Hand Lane South subway, please? Stand, as it were. Let us have your name and address.
I'm Dana Winter. I live at 97 Hand Lane. And I don't know if this is the letter that you guys received, but I wrote a letter to Peter Van Scoyac. I also canvassed my street. I didn't have enough time to go up and down every lane, but I collected signatures of 40-ish residents of the lanes. And I just wanted to read my letter out loud. Dear Peter, I am writing you in hopes that you will be able to take action to place a moratorium on approving any subdivisions or lot line variations in the Amagansett lanes. I and my neighbors are alarmed by the size and scope of projects that are getting approval and at the rapid changes we are seeing in our neighborhoods. We believe the town building codes and zoning regulations are working for some builders and realtors, but not for us, the residents of the lanes. Some of us are builders and realtors ourselves, but we find what is happening alarming. From difficulty driving safely down our streets due to workers' vehicles being parked on either side of the street in no parking zones when new homes are built, to 1 acre lots getting approval to be subdivided into 2 half-acre lots and 2 very large homes being built where there was once 1 single family modest home. Our quality of life is being negatively impacted. We object to the subdivisions that increase building density. Additionally, we object to the size and scope of some, but certainly not all building projects. There are many homes that have been built in recent years that blend in beautifully into the lots they are on and look as if they belong on the street. But many new buildings are taking every inch of buildable space from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, that our current building and zoning codes allow. And the result is homes that not only change the character of our neighborhood, but already stressed water systems and negatively impact the climate. We also object to mature trees being removed from said properties to make way for new homes. We believe the code that allows these trees to be removed, because the land was once farmland, also need to be revised to protect nature. We believe clearing brush and bushes to make room for houses makes sense, but mature trees not only look beautiful, but pull carbon from the atmosphere, and we believe they should be protected. Going forward, we would like to promote changes to the zoning and building codes so that we can preserve what is left before our neighborhoods become completely unrecognizable to us. Thank you for your attention. And I'd like to submit this to you guys in written, or do I have to?
Jody, is it good? Should be submitted to you all?
Yes, right here.
Submitted to,
So I can hand it to her, and I have pages of signatures, and trust me, I only went out for 2 hours. If I had had more time, I would have a lot more signatures.
public comment well, let me just see, is there anybody else who wishes to be heard on the public comment?
Can you state and spell your name?
Sure. Mark, M-A-R-C, Schultz, S-C-H-U-L-T-Z. I mean, I just have one quick question, really. Obviously, when you take a lot that was 1 acre, had 1 house on it for 50 odd years or whatever or more, and you make a decision or are able to make a decision to put 2 houses on it for a builder, it's purely an economic decision. So we have to take a thought about economics versus quality of life. And my real question to you, why not 3 houses? I live on less than a third of an acre. So why not? Let's put 3 houses there. Well, it's better for the builder. Let's ask the builder, why not put 3? Let's really grab the economics out of it and forget the quality of life. And this is my issue. When do we stop just pure economics? I have no problem with the builder coming in and buying an acre of land, knocking down the house, building a new home. People want larger homes, newer homes. That makes sense on 1 acre lot. But why create double the density? And that's all we're doing for economics of a builder that does not live in that area or that neighborhood. Simple as that.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public, please?
Good evening, Chairman Kramer, members of the board. I'm Britt Industry. I'm here representing the project at 115 Hand Lane. I don't have many extensive comments. I just want to note that zoning was established in this town that's established B resident zoning in this neighborhood, which requires 20,000 square feet of lot area that are known as a half-acre lot. Ms. Winters and her husband, Mark Schultz, who both just spoke, live on 0.33 of an acre. The lot in question here is over an acre. So by that measure, their lot is a third of the size of this lot. This lot is completely conforming to zoning, B residents. If you want to change density or change residents, you have to look more globally at residence districts. We don't have a residence district really that's under B. So this is conforming. 2 lots. There's only 1 other lot on Hand Lane that can be subdivided again that wasn't previously subdivided. I just wanted to have the facts on the record. Thank you very much.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to be heard on this application? In that case, there'll be 7 days for further written comment to be submitted, to be submitted to the planning board office. And at this point, though, there'll be no more spoken public comment. We'll leave the public hearing portion of our meeting. Thank you for coming out and speaking. We appreciate it. And now it's back to, now we'll do the sub-waiver review on Donald Robertson sub-waiver modification. Marco, is the applicant here on that? On, Donald Robertson sub-waiver? Yes. There you go.
Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up.
Kathy's the board on that.
We could. Very blurry for some reason. All right. Yeah, I'll work on that for the next meeting. And something with the quality settings I put on the laptop.
Okay, so this has been reviewed once before. This is a request for a modification of a previously approved sub-waiver that has been made to remove the approved building envelope and allow additional clearing of 10 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Road. Sorry, not Hog Creek. 10 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Highway, identified as Suffolk County Tax number 300-119-4-8.2, which is lot 3 of the Robertson subway. That's what is here. It's lot 3. There's a total of 4 lots. The parcel is zoned A residence, partially cleared of natural vegetation. It contains a single-family residence with associated accessory structures. The 3 remaining lots in the sub-waiver are also approved with residential uses. It's not depicted on the map here, but there's 2 lots to the left, west of it, and 1 lot to the east. This is very close to 3 Mile Harbor. The Robertson sub-waiver was approved in 1987 to create 4 residential lots. The planning board approved map illustrates building envelopes for each residential lot. It does not appear that a building envelope was specifically defined by their meets and bounds in the approval. However, it is noted that the clearing is to be limited within the building envelope. The building envelope suggests the yard setback requirements at the time of the subdivision, with a 40-foot setback on the side of the lot, facing 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Road. The subject parcel is provided with 20 feet of legal frontage on this property, on the public road by a common driveway easement, and is considered to be a flag lot. Which you can see on the bottom here. This is the little road there, the common driveway. So back in 1996, the town code was amended to provide that all the sides of a flag lot are considered side yards. So thus, in this case, well, not in this case, I'm sorry. So therefore, under that code revision, the front and rear yard setbacks do not apply, and 20-foot side yard setbacks for principal structures would apply for all the sides of the subject lot. The setbacks for accessory buildings or structures are 15 feet, but doubled to 30 feet for swimming pools, pool decks, and other pool equipment. So it appears that the building envelope was overlooked when the building permits were issued, and the structures were constructed with setbacks that are not in keeping with those detailed in the approved sub-waiver map. I can zoom in a little bit further so you can actually see the numbers. So you can see here, there's only half of the lot, unfortunately, but half the picture. But you can see this is the building envelope in this solid gray line. Solid gray line, well, black line, I guess, now on here, is the building envelope. This is the pool envelope, which is in this dashed line here. This is the principal envelope by current code standards, accessory, and obviously the blue lines are outlines of the parcel. So this is a survey that the applicant has submitted depicting the approved building envelope, setbacks for principal and accessory structures on the full envelope. The setbacks to the existing structures appear to meet the setbacks for current zoning. You can see at the house, the deck here, obviously there are certain improvements that are outside the building envelope here. So you can see parts of the pool and parts of the deck. There's a concrete wall there, and then that's really what the main house is. So moving on, so condition F of the 1987 sub-waiver approval requires that the clearing on the 4 parcels be confined to the building envelope of each lot, except where needed for purposes of improving the common driveway provided for herein. Condition F of the sub-waiver also states that no more than 36% of the individual lot areas of 4 parcels shall be cleared and or planted with fertilized vegetation. Just move it actually provided the numbers very clearly in the map as well. Can you guys really read that? Okay, if anyone needs me to zoom in a little bit further, I can. Clearing of 36% for lot 3 would be 15,000 roughly square feet. It appears that the clearing limitation was based on the recommended clearing by the Suffolk County Planning Commission for the lots in the Pine Barrens at that time. Chapter 255-2-60 of the town code limits the clearing of the subject lot to 19,904 square feet. At 19,317 square feet, the lot does not meet the 36% clearing limits of the approved sub-waiver, but does meet the current clearing limits. The applicant is requesting that the allowed clearing be modified to allow additional clearing to the current maximum clearing limits. If the board agrees with this, condition F would also need to be modified. All those conditions, copies of such, for the most part, are attached to the memo in the back. In addition to the modification of the approval, a modification of the declaration of common driveway covenants and restrictions, also attached to the memo as well, and also in the file, would be required as conditions regarding clearing limits are also included. Condition 4 of the declaration states that the conditions states that the same conditions detailed in condition F of the planning board approval, that no more than 36% of the individual lot areas of the 4 parcels shall be cleared. If the planning board were to find the request by the applicant to modify the approval for the additional clearing is acceptable, it does not appear that the declaration grants the planning board the ability to amend the condition by a majority +1, but I think I'll elaborate a little bit further on that. But I think council can elaborate a little bit on that later on. The planning board should discuss if a modification for amending the clearing limits in the CNRs is acceptable, and if so, should consult with council if the planning board would have the ability to amend the covenant. Although the survey states that the lot is in compliance with current clearing limits, the lot may require additional clearing, which is discussed further. So moving on to the common driveway, the planning board had previously noted that the common driveway easement appears not to be constructed in accordance with the approved sub-waiver. I have the pictures in the memo as well, but I'm just going to see if I can pull it up.
Should be in the file.
Yeah, just turn it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird setup.
So this is the common driveway easement illustrated in the approved subdivision map that was filed with the Suffolk County within a declaration of common driveway CNRs. And then if I go to the other one, this is what currently exists at the moment. It's a little bit different. It appears that existing cleared area of roughly 40 feet by 20 feet in the middle of lots 4 serves as an emergency turnaround for the common driveway. This is in contrast from the approved map, in which lot 3 is to contain a 30-foot by 30-foot emergency turnaround in the southeastern corner of the lot. So you can, that's where it is over here. This 30-foot here in lot 3, and a small portion of lot 4 as well. I think it's about 20 feet, it says. According to previous aerials, the existing cleared area was used as a pathway during the construction of the structures on lot 4 and has remained as a remnant. In order to be in compliance with the approved sub-waiver and CNRs, lot 3 is to construct a 30-foot by 30-foot turnaround, which would require a minimal amount of clearing of around 900 square feet. It is noted that constructing the turnaround would increase the amount of clearing to roughly 20,217 square feet. As a result, the applicant would be required to revegetate the square footage elsewhere on the property. Areas of the property that could be revegetated include areas where there are existing bamboo plants, which are considered by the town as invasive species. So basically, over the history of the development of this, basically back in 2004, even though sub-waiver was granted way back in the 80s, didn't really get built and developed until around early 2000s. And right off the bat, here you go.
Gotta tap the screen.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got it. Basically, in the areas, the constructors carved out this pathway here, and that just has stayed over time and was improved with the gravel and whatnot. And then the pathway was made over here, actually, like this. And that was kind of how they got access to construct the house in the back over there. And then over time, half this area here was brought back to revegetated, was left for revegetation, and they made this pathway here and formalized that as their access to the back of that house. And so this kind of has been left here as a kind of like a pseudo emergency turnaround.
How big is that pseudo turnaround?
I'm not quite sure. I don't have any surveys. It's not illustrated on anything, so I don't. I can take.
Identified as a turnaround? I mean,
No, it's just something that was left behind.
imagining that that's what it's used
Yeah,
for.
right.
Yeah, I would say if by scale, it's probably like 40 feet. It's probably like 40 feet by 20 feet or by 15. It's a little bit narrow, but it's fairly long. But that's just how it got developed when the houses were first constructed back in the early 2000s. And kind of just left that way. So as mentioned earlier, the planning board should discuss their opinion on the applicant's request for additional clearing. Should the board find the request favorable, the board should discuss with council if a modification of the CNRs would be possible. In addition, the applicant will be required to construct a common driveway in accordance with the approved declaration sub-waiver approval. This would require additional clearing and revegetation to an amount that would have to be determined. And regarding to the view easement, applicant has submitted a copy of a private view easement that is shown on the survey. Once we get the survey back up, I'll show you. That was pointed out and noted on the top in the northern portion. There is an edge of clearing line as well as that was illustrated, which is useful. So you can see here, view easement, there's this line here. There are like some sort of dots and hash marks over here, but you can't really see it. But that's about this rectangular shape. So the applicant submitted a copy of that private view easement that was established in 2003 between the owners of lot 3 and 4, 4 being the least of it. Chapter 255-11-74 of the town code requires that all structures except for fences shall have a 10-foot setback to scenic or conservation easements running in favor of the town. This easement is a private view easement, and thus structures are not required to meet the 10-foot setback. which you can see it doesn't really have here, but as noted before. So, in conclusion, the applicant is requesting to modify the sub-waiver to approve the previously approved building envelope and modify the amount of clearing allowed on the parcel. In accordance with the approved sub-waiver, the lot is to construct a common driveway in which the ground. The planning board should discuss if the modification for amending the clearing limits in the CNR is acceptable, and if so, should consult with counsel if the planning board would have the ability to amend the covenant.
Well, thank you, Marco.
I just had a quick question. So you know how the driveway, when it was subdivided, has, but none of it has entrances into the parcels, right?
Yeah.
So when they go for a building permit, that's not something that then they ask for, is like a driveway up to the house, or?
They would, yeah.
Yeah, so,
It's just, they're just trying to show the common driveway so that everyone has access and there's a
Okay.
turnaround.
In regards to clearing, I mean, that's, I think I said so it doesn't count towards it.
when
But
it's cleared, so look like a building permit, though, that's, the clearing is calculated at that point, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Sam,
Good question.
you know, I'd go ahead and
Yeah, go
give
ahead.
the legal opinion. So yeah, I've looked at this issue of amending the CNRs with John and Andy and Tara over the last couple of days. And our conclusion is that if the board so agrees that it is within the ability of the board to amend the covenant lacks the standard language that we use now about the board having the ability to amend with a majority plus one. This covenant's from, I think, 1988. That, from what I've reviewed, wouldn't stop the board from having the ability to amend the covenant if it saw fit. I think a bigger issue that we've reviewed is that this is a subdivision, and there's case law that states that if lot owners buy into a subdivision in reliance on something like, for example, the non-development of a reserved area, then amending a covenant that would allow that reserved area, for example, to be developed would be problematic because those buyers arguably bought in reliance on that reserved area being undeveloped. The case that I'm looking at is For Real Homes Incorporated versus Incorporated Village of Muttontown et al. 12882D 585 Second Department 1987. Here, it's a little different situation. This is where you have a covenant that applies separately to each lot, but the covenant we're talking about applies to lot 3. It's hard to determine whether the lot owners of lot 2 and 4, for example, bought in reliance on a clearing restriction that applies to lot 3. The planning board has had this issue come up in the past. I talked about it with John today. The conclusion at that planning board was they allowed at the public hearing, obviously the neighbors were noticed. They took in any comments on their thoughts on amending that covenant. And at that public hearing, there were no comments. So the board would amended the covenant. That's, it's not in our town code necessarily as a procedure, but that's the way it's been handled in the past. This is a little bit of a unique situation. And so, I'm not saying that you have to amend the covenant. I'm just saying that it's within the board has the ability, if it so chooses, to amend the covenant, in our opinion.
So if we scheduled a public hearing and folks came in and spoke against it, then we would not.
Like I said, you have the ability to amend it. That doesn't mean that you have to amend it.
Right.
So
we follow our usual procedure of taking the public into account, but not here to ratify the public's comment.
Right.
It does open up a door to many issues.
Right. I mean, it's not typical, and this is, Don and his, lengthy experience told me that's how they've handled it in the past.
No, I understand. Ms. Hammer, do you wish to be heard as the applicant on your behalf? Or you on the applicant?
Good evening, board members. Richard A. Hammer. I'm here representing the applicant. I just want to point out a couple things. One, this sounds like a greedy application, right? If you read it, they want to amend it, but actually the underpinning here is this property was issued building permits and certificates of occupancy for lots of structures outside of the building envelope. Nobody realized that there were building envelopes that affected these lots. The other thing I wanted to point out is that if you look at the history, and I'm still of the opinion that these building envelopes were not intended to be put on this, these lots 3 and 4, if you read the planning board's review, building envelopes were discussed specifically to protect slopes, which are on lots 1 and 2. Why they put a building envelope on lot 3 and 4, I can't imagine, but they just drew what zoning allowed at the time. But it wasn't like, oh, substantively, we want these building envelopes. 1 and 2 have a regular shaped building envelopes. That's why it's like, geez, okay, I guess it was kind of a throw-in. So we're looking at it saying, all right, you got building permits and certificates of occupancy. So you legally have structures that exist outside of those building envelopes. Just kind of a funny situation. The other thing is the certificate, the covenants and restrictions. Typically, this is 1988. I don't know, 1988. I think I was graduating high school. It's a different era, basically. But, if you think about it, these covenants and restrictions today for each lot would be recorded with meets and bounds and would say, here it is. The only reference to it was there's in the covenant, it says clearing will be confined to the building envelope. It didn't impose the building envelope. And then the map references if you have to go back and find the file map and say, oh, there's building envelopes on it, but it doesn't even say, I think all structures shall be in the building. It's just a very strange thing that occurred in this case. The other thing, the clearing, well, that was kind of like, well, geez, the Pine Barrens relaxed their clearing based on, current knowledge, all that. Why wouldn't we do it for this lot? If it was imposed because of Pine Barren restrictions, now our town code has its own separate limitation that it deems to be acceptable. So I think it's reasonable to request that as well. The other thing I want to talk about is the access driveway. This is a very interesting one. Today, if you did a sub waiver of 4 lots, you would be, as a developer, required to clear, grade, improve it, install drainage. Nothing was done. As a matter of fact, the resolution of the board's approval, it says you shall use as much as practicable the common driveway. I mean, if you actually pull the resolution, what does that mean? I don't really know what that means, but there isn't really an enforcement mechanism in play. All these lots have houses on them. They all have certificates of occupancy, and the resolution says, you have to comply with these before building permits are these conveyed separately. Certificates of occupancy. Nobody wants us to go and clear this common driveway, although technically all 4 members would have the ability if they all said, hey, you know what, we'd really like to put that area in. I think they'd probably get together and pay to do it. But, this isn't the developer. This is the guy that bought the lot that has this turnaround proposed on it. And as it turns out, it was built on lot 4 for whatever reason, but it's working. It's worked for however many years since 1988. I don't even want to think about it and count the number of years. But, it's certainly a strange situation that, in equity, I would say, there isn't really an enforcement mechanism right now to impose that, the subdivision access in accordance with the map. There really wasn't one in the time in 1988 either. So I just want to point out that, this isn't really an applicant trying to push the limit. This was, hey, listen, we have COs, building permits, all this stuff. The town had dropped the ball a little bit. And when we looked at it all, we said, well, I don't really understand why these are. Shouldn't they just be governed by zoning? And that's what you're asking for. That would legalize, these structures are legal, but it would at least regularize the building envelopes that the building department has been using on these lots for many, many years.
Well,
Undo the confusion.
yeah, please, if only, give me a magic wand. Well, I just have a couple of, I understand what Thomas is saying. I'm still a little unsure, I feel like we should be evaluating this application according to the sub-waiver and not the present code conditions, but maybe that's not what we should be doing. I'm not clear on that. Everything that, Mr. Hammer said makes perfect sense. Everything that Marco says is reportable and makes sense to the degree that the existing conditions don't make a lot of sense. But my main concern is that this just seems to, to speak frankly and not in the construct of this memo, it just seems like everything was sort of built without real attention to the, what the requirements were, that this access road, this shared driveway with the turnaround and all that never happened. And it was many years ago, but I think we have an obligation to sort of fix it now if we can. As a general principle, I have any problem, with the building envelope, the proposed building envelope that would capture the existing dwellings, structures, and so on. So I think that's not a big deal. But I'm not quite sure how this private viewing easement works. And it looks like to me, I've been up there and there's a whole mess of bamboo on the north side, I think. And I don't know if that's within this private view easement, but that seems to me like it should be removed. That's an invasive species. And I just don't understand. I'm not in favor of making a lot more clearing. I think that's a problem. It's right on Dumont Harbor pretty much. It's just up the road, really. It's a really pretty spot. The elevations are, give nice views and so on, but I don't feel, it seems odd to me that the turnaround for an emergency vehicle would be within the private lot, that is where, that's the assessment, is that little space there is where a fire truck would turn around. Because Randy brought up a good point earlier about, these roads needing to be maintained for emergency use. So, what if it's a winter weekend and that fellow's not out and he doesn't arrange to have his driveway plowed and someone, needs to get up, because it's very hilly, it's not I have a little Prius. Endeavored right up there, but I would have trouble in the snow, getting up there in my car. So I'm really not even sure what to say about it. I think that I'm not sure where the turnaround would go. It seems like it should be at the end of the subdivision as proposed by the covenants and restrictions, but I think most people would look on this map and think we would turn around in the parking area that's neighboring, it's right next to the dwelling. I wouldn't even think about that little, what looks like a parking space to be the place where a fire truck or an ambulance or something could, back in and turn around. So I'm perplexed by this, frankly. I'm not, the building envelope is I don't mind moving the building envelope. That doesn't trouble me. I would prefer not to see any more clearing. I think the bamboo should be removed. And I think that, it's difficult in this instance to say, should the applicant construct the emergency turnaround, because this emergency turnaround affects more than just the applicant. It's all four property owners there. So I guess my suggestion would be for everybody to come together and decide what that emergency turnaround will be. And if this guy on lot 4, this is lot 4, right? Mm-hmm. Is chill with it all happening on his lot, then fine. But that should be stated in some way and made known so that it's maintained in that way, so that it actually provides access. I just don't see, if I own that lot, I wouldn't want that on my lot. I'm just saying, so I don't know exactly where it would happen if there's more. There seems to be a little room on, I guess it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? On lot 2, there's some property on the south side of the general subdivision that might provide that. But, I think that has to be addressed, and it doesn't feel to me that that has been properly addressed. So I don't know if that's very helpful, but that's the best I have. Good point. Yeah.
Does anybody have any additional comments? Because, what we're being asked to do is could be, yes. I don't know.
That would have been the builder who subdivided it that would have had to provide that.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got individual owners. I totally agree with Kathleen, what she's saying, but I don't know if the onus is on this one guy.
Well, I mean, it's being foist on that one person.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what we're trying to do here is backfill and
Yeah.
correct something that should have been addressed before.
I do have comments and a question.
Please, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I guess Eric or Thomas, is this something where we would have to find a change of circumstance? Or that's not the case with covenants?
I think you would,
It
but
seems like that type of,
I mean, I would
just
say.
yes, sir, I'm in a.
Yeah. But I would say that the change in the code in the clearing restriction.
Yeah, no, I have my own, opinion about that, just, well, I do find, well, because I thought that would be the answer. I think that the building envelopes are clearly okay to change. It seems like there was an obvious reason why they did that. It was not intended to be restrictive as it is. And I feel the same way about clearing. I don't see any change of circumstance really for the driveway other than they didn't build it as they were supposed to. It's normal for, the between the last two lots of the subdivision for that to be where the turnaround is so that they can access every lot, but not have to drive onto an extra lot to take care of a problem on the previous lot. So I'm open to what Kathleen said about finding a, solution that works for everybody, but I'm inclined to say that you should build the common driveway as it was supposed to be built. And then I'm definitely in favor of relaxing the clearings. I think the clear change of circumstances, the law that it was based on by all appearances, and the same with the building envelopes.
I'd like to get a consensus on those two issues, on the removal of the building envelopes and the modification of the clearing. Is there anybody who objects to that?
Yeah, I'm gonna take my position on this is, first of all, we get a certain amount of examples from where the building department issues building permits in error and COs in error. And we have a certain amount of examples where people don't follow the site plan. And to me, when I read this record, this is very clear. Here's what the planning board said in the approval. Clearing and fertilized vegetation areas shall be limited to 36% of the individual lot areas for lots 1, 2, 3, and 4. Clearing shall be limited to the building envelopes of each respective lot, except where needed for common driveway improvements. And then they require that a covenant be filed, which was signed by Mr. Robertson and his attorney. I just think claiming, then there's the caveat emptor, if you buy property without reviewing the record, whose responsibility? So let me, I also wanted to read you how clear, this is what the planning board approval says. Applicants shall submit covenants in a form subject to approval by council for this board, including reference to the following: scenic easements, large lot easements, common driveway easement, and building envelope. So I don't mind trying to work out something where we get the 36% clearing. Frankly, I don't think most of you are going to agree with me, but my feeling with this one is conform to the approval. That's how everything.
So we're
Build the driveway that was approved with the review of the fire department. Meet the building envelopes. I do notice on the survey of this lot that the entire principal building structure is within the building envelope from the original map. And all of the stuff that's outside, it's the pool and the decks and all that. So,
What he's suggesting is very attractive from I think from the board's point of view, because it cuts through all the issues. And it says, this is what we agreed, this is what you agreed, or your predecessors anyway, agreed, and live with it. The only question I have is that too harsh? Particularly with respect to the building envelopes and the clearing issues, because those are, those I think afford themselves some flexibility by this board. It's the driveway that's the problem. And so I'm looking for a, divide the baby kind of thing here. In some cases adhere to the way it was written originally, which you're advocating. And in other instances where we have the flexibility, well, we think the flexibility would be warranted or equitable to exercise that flexibility. And I'm just wondering if there's some
I just
middle.
want to say that.
Building envelope, which I think.
You're right.
No, I think that's probably the point of least resistance. Clearly the way the board approved it was to limit clearing to the amount of land within that building envelope.
Right, so.
That's what this says.
And when I suggested that I was willing to relax the building envelope, but I'm not willing to relax the clearing. I said that, for this exact reason. I've read those too, and we actually discussed this last time we looked at this application. So
then maybe we have three, we could divide the baby into thirds.
Well,
yes.
Actually, another analogy, I was like.
Sorry, I just.
The cake or the bread or something, yeah. I just feel as though, as a board, this is a very, there may have been things that were issued in error. I get it, that, as Randy says, there are so many times we have applications come before us that have had building permits or certificates of occupancy that were issued in error, and we do what we can to help the applicant, but in this instance, it was pretty clear. And, our water quality has only gotten more tenuous since then. So I'm not strongly in favor of increasing clearing, even if that's what the code says. If this covenant restriction restricted it to a particular way, this board may have felt differently for different reasons. And that was the reason they had these clearing restrictions put in. And it's really close to Puma Harbor. All that water, it's very high, it's a high elevation, it all drains right down in there. There's no question where it goes. And
it's groundwater.
That's a persuasive.
Exactly.
Yes, that's persuasive.
So
they are different, and they don't need to be grouped in the same breath.
Right.
Doesn't the clearing meet the current zoning standards?
It does, but the point I'm trying to make is that at the time this was drawn, that it was modeled after the Pine Barrens, which was a 35%. This is 36, which I think is sort of an odd number, but it was 35%. And we have since gone back and asked for Pine Barrens, criteria to be re-included because we expanded that view. But at the time, in 1988, only been in the last 5 to 10 years, we've understood that nitrogen is the enemy of the surface water bodies and our drinking, our aquifer and so on, and which is why we have low nitrogen systems. And it's also why we try not to clear too much because these oaks and other vegetation, let me just finish, purify that water as it passes by. So the less you clear, the more filtering you're doing for the water.
So even though the current zoning requirements are the requirements that this clearing on this lot meets, you're saying that we should go back to the previous clearing minimums which were
The conditions of
later.
approval at the time.
Yeah.
It's like saying, to my mind, it's like trying to change your birthday. You were born when you were born.
But if they were to develop this lot today, they would have the clearing that's on there now.
Yes, and that's a mitigating factor.
What?
But it's a mitigating factor, except that the covenants and I just want to say, if you were on that board in 1988, and these are the covenants and restrictions that you approved for your particular reasons, which may not be definitively stated, but they were chosen, within a rubric or a protocol that made sense and was applicable at the time. I don't know that we can go back and say, it doesn't really matter.
But are you pitting that board's decision with whoever decided that the clearing should be different number, or a higher number.
No, so this was decided on
Taking
that.
sides with that board,
Well, yeah, well, I'm taking sides. I mean, to my mind,
you're leaning towards their.
well, because the board, the planning board, we're the next several generations down of that planning board. And to my mind, when the planning board makes a decision, it shouldn't be tampered with unless there's a really compelling reason to do it. And to my mind, there isn't a compelling reason to change the clearing because it's so specifically articulated what clearing was meant to occur on this land.
There's still disagreement between the county and the state and the town about clearing of the pine barrens. For example, in the industrial park, where the town has CI zoning, the town allows you to clear the entire, I think, or 80% of the lot. The county still recommends that you only clear, I think, well, I don't want to get the wrong numbers, but it's more restricted than.
It is, yes.
And the town board has chosen to ignore that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, what they used to be
the
that.
industrial park developed.
That's true, but I mean, that's a whole other.
Well, there's a whole other list of
Right.
reasons for that.
But did that answer your question?
Yeah, and could we mitigate the building envelope question by not forcing them to adhere to the original building envelope?
Yeah.
And still make them comply to the clearing that was set back then?
We can just adjust it.
It's an adjustment.
Chairman, can I just, I want to provide a factual note here?
Yeah, let's look at the.
Okay, so if you read the environmental assessment form that was adopted in 1988, it's bereft of any discussion of clearing whatsoever. It will just reference, we want this to tag to the Pine Barrens Commission. That's where the 36% number came from. It's not in our town code at the time. It's not today. If you said we're going to tag it to the Pine Barrens, it's going to give you 57% clearing. Our town code is more restrictive. So, since 1988 to today, science has improved. A lot of things have improved. The Pine Barrens would allow more generous clearing on this lot than our town code. So that's why we said, why wouldn't we be governed by our town code, which is consistent with our comprehensive plan? But saying 36%, they don't even agree with that number at this point. It would be much more generous than what you get under our town code.
Remind me of what percentage is cleared now.
It's like.
19 and change, and the properties, I think, just about an acre.
Good evening, Tara Burke here for the applicant as well. So the existing clearing is 19,317 square feet. The current code is 19,904. So it's about 600-ish under the current code. So the Pine Barrens is 36%, which is 15,695. Right, so it's about, what is that,
304,000
square thousand. And then 57%, which is current Pine Barrens, is 22,581. And we're at 19,904.
All right.
So to use your logic, then we should allow the current clearing because the current Pine Barrens is even higher than the town code.
Lou, I would say we should.
The current Pine Barren is 22,000 square feet.
There's not a
Town
magic
code is
number.
about 19,000.
There's not a magic number.
And their current clearing is 19,000, thereabouts.
But their position is clearly that's what we said, that's what the planning board said, that's what they should do.
I know, but I'm trying to be.
I agree with you, Lou, but I
I'm
think
trying to be practical. And listen, I'm just as adamant about clearing as you are. And I'm concerned about groundwater quality and all that. That's high on my priority list. So I'm not trying to give anything away on that end. But I also want to be. So wait, well, that's what I'm trying. I'm not taking any position yet. I'm just trying to explore here. So, what Mr. Hammer said is that the current science, Pine Barren regulations are saying that the clearing should be 22,000 square feet. The town code says a minimum of 19,900 square feet. Their clearing is 19,300. It's less than the Pine Barrens by 3,000 square feet, and it's even less than the current code.
But they're asking
So-
us to approve, I think, the full amount, so they could theoretically clear more, right?
Yeah, if
I
we,
think you-
They're asking us-
57.
Well, they're asking to allow, they're asking to come into full compliance with the current code,
Right,
so.
they wanna go
You're
up
right,
to
they're not there yet.
57% clearing rather than 36. That's what they want. They want us to change it to the, as you're
How
saying.
many square feet do they want? I thought it was,
No, well, I think it's easier to talk about it in percentages, that percentage of the lot.
Yeah,
600 more square
let's
feet.
stick to that. It's easier.
Yes, that's cleared. The percentage of the lot that was permitted to be cleared was 36%. Presently, the percentage of the lot that's cleared is what, 30?
Right now?
Yes.
Right. The issues seem
Around
really
50,
clear. It seems like it's a vote, you know? I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I'm
it.
just
I'm
trying
not
to
sure.
explain to Lou because he seems still not to, I think, anyway, and then, so what they're saying is the percentage of the lot that's cleared now, which is roughly 50%, would fall in line with the current Pine Barrens legislation, which permits 57%, which is obviously greater than 36%. It's almost twice as much.
All right, I think we need to bring this to a conclusion.
Not to complicate, but
Go ahead.
clarify. Chief.
And then I do want to draw, join the issues. So go ahead.
Just a little bit of history, though. So this was approved in 1988. At that time, the town actually had no townwide clearing restrictions unless you were in the Water Recharge Overlay District or the Harbor Protection Overlay District. I can't speak to the intentions of the board at the time. I was 6 years old, but I think that clearly there was an attempt there in the presence of no clearing restrictions on the property to adopt some kind of restriction for this subdivision. The town, it wasn't until the early 2000s that townwide clearing restrictions on, non-water recharge, non-HPOD properties were adopted. They actually were amended a number of times. Originally, the town's clearing restrictions were more of a even percentage that didn't account for the size of a lot. And then it was amended a couple of times, basically to make it so that if you had a smaller lot, a greater percentage of your lot you could clear, it was more forgiving. But then very large properties, it was a lesser percentage and capped at a maximum of 80,000 square feet. So there was a little bit of a work in progress that went on there. So just so that you know, when this was adopted, there actually were no clearing restrictions on this property. And I think that that's probably where that condition came from. And yeah, it mirrored the Pine Barrens Commission at the time, their guidelines.
It's in the Pine Barrens and it's in the most protected groundwater recharge zone. So the planning board was attempting to protect it. It might have been included in the water recharge overlay if it hadn't been so developed in that area.
Let's address the questions. Do we agree that, do we find the applicant's request to remove the building envelope acceptable?
Yes. To remove it?
Yes, that's what they're asking.
No, remove it? I thought you all wanted to relocate it.
No, I think Ray, I think the problem that I think that they got into is by making a building envelope meet current zoning when zoning could change. So I think if we put a new building envelope that meets today's zoning, and then that changes later, say that the zoning later becomes more restrictive and it's a 50-foot setback, then.
But that's not it though. They clearly attempted to control the amount of clearing.
But no, but Randy, the clearing.
Building area.
The building area is larger than the clearing restriction, for sure, right?
Yes.
So even if we.
It's larger than the 36.
Yes, much larger. It would just met the setback lines. So the building envelope is probably 70+% of the property. I would say more than that. I don't know, but much larger. It just met the setback lines, which have now changed.
Right.
So I think the clearing restriction, even at 57%, is going to be more restrictive than what setbacks allow.
Let's get so clear. All right. So again, to remove the building envelope. Is there agreement all around?
Yes.
Except.
No, Ian makes a good point. I hadn't looked at it that way, but I want to hear what the next part is.
The next one.
Remove the building envelope and then
And then the next, the applicant's request to modify the maximum clearing allowed. And if so, should they consult counsel if the board has the right to do so?
They are separate issues though, Randy. I think you could be for one and not the other.
Are you gonna,
I
are
am.
you gonna modify
for
the
one and
clearing
not
on
the
all?
other.
I'm gonna vote to do that.
No,
yeah.
but what about all 4 lots? You gonna do all 4 lots?
We only have one.
We only have one application.
But he's right,
We
it
only-
sets precedent.
Why-
It's-
why-
it's
why wouldn't
relevant
the
to
other-
I'm
subdivision.
comfortable with the precedent.
Why wouldn't the other 3 come in and say,
They
hey,
might,
I'm comfortable with that.
they might. That's one of the,
okay,
that's one of the reasons to vote for or against it.
you've got, this is in the public interest, right?
I think it's the issue of fairness.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm glad you're saying it.
Fairness,
I mean,
would you, if they came to you before they built with a vacant lot
Right.
and said to you, here's what we think we should do.
absolutely. If the circumstances were, by all indications, they were matching, you know, they were trying to prevent clearing in a climate that didn't have a town code that allowed it, they pinned it to something clearly that has now changed because whatever the science or opinions have changed. I think in the interest of fairness, yeah, we should, I would say, match what everybody else has to do.
You are gonna create a set of dominoes. I would think you are. But you know something? We face that all the time. We had that application earlier today with the
Right.
same exact issue, actually 2 of them. So.
There are areas of steep slopes on lots 1 and 2. It might change.
Yeah, you might have a different, you might
The
look at it more
topography might
carefully.
dictate something
Or
different.
more, not
than
more
the others.
carefully,
But you raised a really important point.
So do we find that the applicant's request to modify maximum clearing allowed?
No.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Have we agreed that we could change the covenant?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, council says. So.
No.
No.
Still, still yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No, no, yes.
No, it's this.
You know, I hate to put Thomas on the spot, but isn't a majority plus 1?
No, it's not.
Okay, so it just can be a majority, okay.
Jody, did you get that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Finally, should the applicant,
So that was a vote on what?
that was.
Clearing.
Well, they get to clear
So-
more.
You get the
So
clear.
they can
We
clear
lose.
more and you're removing the building envelope.
Yep. 57%, here I come.
Should the applicant construct the emergency turnaround in accordance with the approved subway? See, that's,
This is the toughest one.
I would like to reword that question. I mean, I think the applicants, I don't know, why, I don't understand why it falls on the applicant. Why is it falling on him? Because he's the fourth, because he's the one that's.
Because it's on his property.
Because it's his property, yeah.
Because it's on his property.
Everything else is there except for the little thing on their
You know, I
property.
mean, if you live in a, listen, I live in a.
Easternmost property, is that the
Well, it's
idea?
at the easternmost, but you're
It's
the.
the second to last. It's the second, it's all, I mean, it makes
It's
sense.
always the second to
So,
last.
yeah, so you can get to the last property. I mean, unless there's more information, I think that should stick, but I'm open to being convinced. I'm just not.
Could I suggest something, and the applicant's attorney would probably want to speak to it, but possibly having the applicant, since the turnaround was illustrated on their property, having them finish the turnaround, do it in conformance with the code. There's a standard dimension and design. Have them have whoever professional they have propose something. I know it's not all asphalt right now, doesn't have to be, but have them add that turnaround on their property to spec. That would increase the clearing on their property, and they are kind of right up against what they would be allowed under the current town code. It was noted by Marco that there's and I think by Kathy as well, there's a big area of bamboo in the rear of this property. A simple revegetation plan that would compensate for the amount of additional clearing for the turnaround could be a requirement of a modification.
I think that's a good.
How does the
Well, how does that differ from just saying that?
They have
that
that.
yeah, that
They have
covenant
to do what
doesn't,
they have to do.
that covenant's not changing. How does that differ from? If we just say the covenant's not changing, isn't that exactly what you just said?
Yeah, I'm saying don't change it so that they don't have to provide a turnaround.
Yeah.
Well, I agree
The
with you.
turnaround needs to be there.
Important.
Yeah.
It's not getting around that.
So to me, I vote yes on the first 2, covenant changes and no on the last.
So this is for all 4 lots.
No.
These covenants are for the entire subway.
But they're all 4 lots are not making the application.
Yeah, but where, are you modifying, are you gonna create a new
Are we,
set of
are we,
They're all
are we
built.
modifying all
I know, but
4?
you're doing all 4
No.
lots.
But
No, you're modifying, the covenant's only modified for lot 3.
How is that, Thomas, when this says this is the whole, all 4 lots? The covenants that were
Is it
recorded.
3 or 4? 3.
Well, you file a new covenant that says that we're changing it for lot three.
Changing lot three.
Yeah. That the other lots, still have.
This lot, the one we're talking about.
Okay.
How's the question phrased?
Question is phrased. Yeah, I'm wondering about that too.
Turnaround.
This is the turnaround. This is the turnaround.
I understand. Okay.
Which is also, I guess, is that all?
It's mostly on lot.
The current turnaround, the little thing is on lot 4, which is not how we would ever design,
Well, and I wonder if the guy on lot
They're the
4
ones who are
even
making
think-
the application.
somehow I doubt the guy on lot 4
Thinks
thinks
that's a turnaround.
that is a turnaround.
Well, one fine day, he's going to wake up and find a fire engine.
It looks like a parking space.
There is no turnaround.
I just think it's important, it's probably not going to be a full-size fire truck or something like that, but if you do have an emergency services vehicle that it is going to lot 4, gets to the end of that driveway, no matter how bad that driveway is, they need to turn around. There needs to be a cleared space that meets those dimensions so that they can back up the truck. The most important part, it should be unobstructed the whole length, but the most important thing for getting the vehicle out of there, whether it be an ambulance that has to pick somebody up and get out of there in a hurry, is to have that turnaround be designed to spec so that the vehicle can get in and out. Back down.
That's the point you've made, and I think that's an incredibly valid one.
But listen to that, but it's valid to make it when this thing is being subdivided in the first place and the house is being built.
Right.
And the developer is doing it.
Right.
And now, we have this in front of us and we're suddenly trying to impose that on the guy who happens to own the lot where this should be.
So if anybody,
how is that fair?
comes in and doesn't follow the approval, you're saying, and they sell the lot, and the guy comes in later and says, I didn't know that we should change it so that he's okay. That's really.
No, but the
you're
builder should have done that. The
Maybe-
builder should have done that.
Well,
I know, but
you-
the covenants.
you're just inviting people to come in and ask for.
Maybe you don't even.
I don't really see what your
topic
point
of-
is about that.
Maybe you don't even need to broach the topic of whether or not you can make them or you can compel them to do it. You might want to hear from the applicant's attorney. They might be willing to do it.
Let's hear from the applicant's attorney.
Maybe they're willing.
But do we have to, we know the situation. We either want to change the covenant or we don't, right?
Well,
You gotta go back to the fire department. If you want to keep that silly thing on lot 4, go back to the fire department, see if they like it. I don't think they will. I think Eric's right.
Well, I think that thing on
Technically,
lot
I-
four is-
I'd like to hear from the applicant. I'd like to hear from the applicant on this, because we're kind
So there
of
is something.
speculating as to what the applicant might
Yeah,
be willing to
truthfully,
do.
I haven't addressed this with my client at all because there's COs, there's no enforcement mechanism under the covenants, under the conditions of approval. It said it didn't even require them to improve this or to pave it or to do anything to it. It said you had to do the easement. They did the easement. All 4 lots have their certificate of occupancy. I don't think our position would be, oh, we're absolutely not going to do it. However, keep in mind, this lot gets burdened by this. I think it's about 600 square feet is the area. It's 30 by 20. That's, clearing is either limited to all, on the lot. That's 600 square feet of clearing, that all the other lot, I guess maybe in fairness, okay, fine. But I don't see how we can require him to do it. I will ask him if he's willing to do that. I do think it's a good idea. It's just unfortunate that, the building permits were issued and that was a trigger under our the subdivision condition, but it was never installed. So to do it now, I just don't know how you do it. They're not going to come.
I think
You
we
know,
get-
in
You have a
New York,
CO?
Yes, absolutely.
Andy, what's
COs.
the rule though in New York? If building permits are issued in error or cert COs are issued in error, do they have any vested rights?
If you want to revoke a CO, you have to go to the zoning board of appeals, which is the procedural due process, and then it's subject to court challenge at that
Well,
point.
if we decide not to change that covenant, maybe you have to do it, maybe you don't, but you're gonna have a subdivision that's non-compliance. I don't see a reason why we should change that covenant. And so we'll see where that leads.
Well, and I think that's probably a reasonable thing is, don't change the covenant. I'm not
Right.
saying, but I don't know how you would say, okay, because it's in the covenant doesn't say the driveway shall
I
be.
think that's not before. Like you're asking us to change something that I don't see a reason to change. After that, I think the application is complete and
I
resolved.
didn't actually mention anything about the common driveway, Marco did. So this was brought up, not requested by the applicant.
Okay.
I would say the board should just say nothing about it. And I'll talk to the applicant and I'll explain to him that you guys would like to see it constructed. but, it comes off as clearing and see if the building department picks up on it. That's-
So I vote to not change the covenant.
Before we do that, Kathy, we just raised.
I just wonder, I mean, when we've changed covenants and restrictions, it's been because there's been a demonstrable change in circumstance. And don't we have to like affirm that in some way, or doesn't the applicant have to say there's been a change in circumstance?
Well,
Therefore, we'd like you to address these covenants and.
well, change in circumstances can be a code change.
Well, I understand what it can be, but we haven't addressed that specifically. And
Do we
any other
need-
time
do we-
we've done this, and in my experience on this board, the change of circumstance has been the first thing we've addressed.
We did address it with the first two, which is with this one, I don't think we have. I don't think there is one.
The first two.
The building envelope and the
Right, but
clearing.
I'm saying as a matter of protocol, whenever we've
Yeah, for sure.
addressed a
I think-
covenant
What
restrictions,
did
that
we
as
have
a
as the first-
procedural
what did we
matter,
have
we
as
have
the- as the
established.
prerequisite?
as a
It's the pine
group
clearance,
that
it's the
we
pine
agree there's a
clearance
change in
percentage
circumstance,
and
therefore-
the setback.
No, but what was the change? What was the change? No, I get it. What was the change in circumstance that we found in the first two?
Well, Ian basically just said it, the change in the clearing requirements over the property and throughout the town and from the Pine Barrens Commission. The setbacks would be the required setbacks under zoning, the setbacks being the building envelope, design not meeting the zoning required setbacks. But I think,
It should.
Mr. Hammer can speak to this.
Yeah,
Yeah, Kathy's bringing up the third point of, well, what's the difference but in relation to the common driveway turnaround? I mean, not to, Mr. Hammer's here, he can make his own argument. I mean, I could, just to be fair, I could see saying that, the developer sold the lots to individuals. There's now a different owner of this.
But he
lot,
said, he said he didn't really
They're
care. I don't think he has the vote, so I think this is moot.
Yeah, I think that the change in that there may not be a change in circumstance sufficient.
So is anybody really lobbying for
the
waiving?
change?
Yes.
Yeah, is there any sentiment for you?
But why haven't they built it yet? And why would they build it now?
We're so far,
We're not.
Well, I'm just saying, it's not gonna get, why would it get built now?
it might not, but we're arguing about whether we find a change of circumstance. I don't think that he has the votes regardless, so let's take a vote, and if you don't, you don't.
They didn't ask for it.
I know, I understand, I don't understand, I think we can get to the end quickly.
I agree with you. All right, so should the applicant construct the emergency turnaround in accordance with the approved subdivision?
Well, I vote not to change the covenants and
Well, that's.
wherever that goes.
Yes.
So that's yes.
I vote not to change the code.
Sharon? Randy? It's unanimous.
They haven't met the.
There was, for whatever reason, there was no change in circumstance to warrant that change. Yeah, I know, we should have started there. We could have got back. All right. That was a long and winding road. So to speak.
Oh, my gosh.
So it was a short and abbreviated drive.
Thank you.
It never got built. All right, thanks very much. We now have 3 matters left, one of which I'm anticipating will not be the world's longest matter. And then the other, we have 2 zoning changes, which we may or may not go with. We'll see, Marco, let you know. We'll see what our timing is on this. All right, the next matter is the Surf Club handle renovation on Unit 22. Will, that's going to be you. Ed, you've got that one. It's Unit 22, and the applicant is in the audience. So go ahead. Sorry? Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, so an application has been made to do a renovation to 1 unit at the Surf Club Resort Rentals in Montauk. The parcel is located between Surfside Avenue and the Atlantic Ocean and is zoned for resort use. The property currently contains 8 two-story buildings with multiple residences, totaling 92 residential units, a swimming pool with fencing, 2 tennis courts, a bathhouse, and an office. The renovation entails enclosing an existing 2-story open entrance for unit number 22 with a new exterior entry wall and door on the first floor and an exterior wall and window on the second floor. The additions would match the existing material and finishes, and infill roofing would also match existing finishes and replace existing trellis framing. Additionally, the project would involve relocating the existing exterior electrical fixtures. Pursuant to Secret in Chapter 128 of the Town Code, this project is a Type 2 action. Pursuant to Section 255 of the Town Code, it appears that this application is small enough in scale to justify, to qualify as a minor site plan, and as a result, the planning board can elect to waive the public hearing requirement. According to Chapter 255 of the Town Code, it specifies that if a property is located within 150 feet of the dune crest on all lands which lie along the Atlantic Ocean east of map 74 in Montauk, when building, constructing, erecting, reconstructing, enlarging, altering, or placing any structure or any improvement whatsoever in or upon land, a natural resources special permit must be obtained for the application. As you can see here on the survey last revised June 8th, 2021, the 150-foot dune crest setback kind of lands right in the midst of the property. And this is where the renovation is, this small square right here. Thusly, in order to move forward, it would require a natural resources special permit to be obtained. So in conclusion, the application is otherwise complete. The board should form a consensus on whether or not a public hearing will be required. If no hearing is required, the application will be complete, ready for approval, pending that NRSP be obtained from the zoning board.
So the applicant wish to be heard on this. Okay, thank you very much for that. Ed?
So if this unit were located on the other side of the complex, none of this would have to have happened, right?
They would technically still need site plan approval, even though it's so minor.
Oh, is that right? Okay. But certainly NRSP, all that stuff, not so much. So yeah, kudos to you all for going through the process with your client, Lori. Yeah, I mean, if you're familiar with this condo complex, there are a lot of very strange little niches and weird little vacant areas and stuff. And this, I think, actually improves it dramatically by filling one of those in. So yeah, I have no other comments. I think it's fine, ready to go.
Okay, does anybody have any other comments?
And no public.
And yeah, no public hearing. There's hearing, no comment. We all agree, no, we waive the public hearing plan. Very well, okay. Next. Oh, well, you know, sometimes you get quickies and you take. You know, anything. No comments here. Now we'll go fishing. Will, gone fishing. Throw your oar in the line in the water on this one.
A real life.
Laura, you're on this one, right? Oh, no, I apologize.
Yes. Yeah. Let's screen check.
Yeah, so
Easier to see. I appreciate you guys trying to be fair. It's a good goal.
This is an application that was last reviewed in 2018. Originally, when the CO was granted in 1998, it was for a 3,800 square foot boat storage building, a two-story building with a marine retail store with an above apartment, a 920 square foot restaurant, a garage with decking and docks. The planning department records clarified that there was an agreement for a snack bar and a restaurant with 16 seats and 172 boat slips on the site. The application was to add 34 outdoor dining seats to the marina. The parcel is zoned waterfront and is located in the Harbor Protection Overlay District and fronts on Lake Montauk. The previous site plan review outlet was in 2 phases, completed in 12 months. The proposed phases. Phase 1 was reconfiguring the parking lot for the 158 spaces, including 6 handicapped accessible spaces, revegetating the property, installing additional drainage structures in compliance with the originally approved drainage plan and upgrading the lighting on the site in accordance with the lighting plan from 2018. Phase 2 was to upgrade the sanitary system, convert the second-story apartment into storage, and the aforementioned 34 outdoor dining seats, which would be eligible for a CO upon completion of the sanitary system specified above. The previous site plan was approved as documented in the planning board resolution from August 2018. However, the applicant has now submitted a request to modify the existing site plan and attaching a revised floor plan as a depiction of the proposed modification. The applicant proposes now that instead of converting the second-story apartment to storage, as outlined in the phase 2 portion of the original plan, to simply retain the apartment at a reduced size for managerial use and only convert a smaller portion of the second story to storage, to retail storage. Additionally, the applicant wishes to reduce the number of boat slips on the property and convert 4 of the approved indoor bar seats, which on the original floor plan, these 4 bar seats were here. Now they have been moved to the outside of the property. And in order to comply with Suffolk County Department of Health Services septic flow limitations. The floor plan submitted with the proposed modification, as I said, is similar to the seating plan submitted in 2017. Converting the indoor bar seats to outdoor seating would decrease the septic flow of the property, as bar seating has a higher density load than outdoor seating. According to the applicant, the amended project has already been reviewed by the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, and approval is pending, condition upon issuance of town and DEC approvals. It is suggested by the planning department that said approval be submitted to the planning board as documentation. For the boat slips, the number of it has varied over the years. It was 170 with the last CO, and now on the most recent site plan indicate the number of existing or proposed slips is 166, and that matches the number of proposed slips on the resolution. According to the current request to modify the site plan, the applicant proposes to reduce the number of boat slips on the property further in order to bring down the septic flow more. But on the floor plans that were submitted, there is no real indication of like the number of boat slips that would be reduced. So for both the outdoor seating, the parking calculations and the boat slips, the applicant should submit a revised site plan that will include updating the septic flow and parking calculations, that will outline the effect of proposed changes to seating and will have on septic flow, and also specify the number of boat slips that are now being proposed. And again, a written confirmation and documentation of the pending Suffolk County Department of Health Services approval regarding the amended proposal is requested to be submitted to the planning board. As for the apartment, the planning department sees no reason why the applicant should not be allowed to retain it to service the needs of the restaurant manager and to use the floor, the smaller portion of upper floor space as they want to.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Good evening, Madeline Van John, representing the applicant, who is actually the new owner of Gone Fishing Marina. That's why we're coming in with this modification request. The new owner decided that it would be important to have an on-site marina manager for security and other reasons. So that's why we came up with this modification. In order to comply with the health department, the flow limitations, we're reducing the boat slips from 166 to 157, and then moving some of the indoor seats outside. It's more of a seasonal restaurant anyway, so they'll be more usable outside. And we will submit copies of what we submitted to the health department. They won't issue their approval until we have the other approvals, but I can submit a copy of the letter saying that the only things outstanding are the other approvals if necessary. And overall, the parking is, our parking requirement is going to have a net reduction of 9 spaces as required, but we're still going to keep the amount that was previously approved. So we will have more than is required. That's why we didn't submit an amended parking plan, but we can submit a plan showing the calculations if that would be
one of the things on the list. Anything else?
No, if anyone has any questions.
Question? First, I'm just curious about the apartment. Would the on-site manager live in the existing apartment? So what you're thinking?
Yeah, so that is the floor plans that were submitted that would, the apartment is going to get a little smaller, but it's just going to be for the on-site marina manager.
I was just curious about the access for that. Does that go through the storage room or, because I saw the stairs were sort of on the.
So there's stairs that are accessed from a few different places, and then you go up the stairs to the second floor, and then you go one direction to the storage and one direction to the apartment.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to make
So-
sure that the configuration, what didn't mean that person had to go through the storage.
Oh,
room.
no, yeah, they don't have
Living
to.
quarters, yeah, okay.
It's separate.
Yeah.
When you say you're removing boat slips, what does that entail specifically in detail?
Well, so basically they're just limited to the amount of boats that can be parked there. And there is a plan that details how boats could be configured, but sometimes that's changed based on, what size of the different boats are in there. So pretty much just a
But
limitation.
is there a structure that's removed so that a boat can no longer?
Looking at the plan, it looks like there's a number of pilings that are being removed. You'll have a floating dock and then you'll have a piling.
So the pilings themselves are being
almost makes them
removed.
like parking stalls.
So there's no way that a boat could park there.
They could, kind of the dock, but there would not be nothing to keep the boat from going laterally.
So it's in New London. So-
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of more just a restriction they have to abide by. Right now, sure, I guess anybody could kind of try and jam in whatever they wanted, but they just abide by the rules because they don't want to be overcrowded any more than anybody else does.
Thank you.
And they need that,
That's what
they
he-
need that, the bow line to go, they need lines on either end of the boat, so, as it docks in, hooks up to a cleat on the dock and then wraps around the piling,
It's a good question.
Let's let Ian.
Oh, Ian.
report. It's
Okay.
Ian's.
Oh, right.
It's Ian's map. It's not a.
Well, we were asking.
Look, I think it's a really straightforward application. I remember when it came before us before, the outdoor seating laws have changed since then. The applicant wanted a lot of more seats outside than they were allowed previously. I'm fine with the proposal, so long, I think it's a numbers game. I think you've got to show that the flow works and that parking works with boat slips, the apartment, the seats and everything else. And if you show that it complies, then I've got no problem at all.
Now, does anyone?
Just a clarification, because in the memo, I think, or you guys submitted a photograph showing where you had eliminated slips and the pilings were
Yeah,
removed.
that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, but
What
I don't
keeps a
know if-
boat from tying up to those pilings?
Well,
It's another boat.
Can I just clarify? We didn't submit that. Actually, that was in the memo. I'm
Oh,
not 100% certain what is.
Oh, that's, oh.
Yeah, I'll,
Just to be clear, I'm asking that they show all of the stuff that they're proposing and that they demonstrate that the calculations work and comply. So
And-
we'll see that.
Right.
so are we
Well,
asking?
that's the site plan. That's what.
Are we asking that pilings be removed or not? Because that's no small.
Well, we're asking.
No,
Right.
we're asking that they show the boat, just like a parking, diagram. They show what they're proposing and that's what they have to do or they're in
And
trouble.
they number the slips, they number the boat slips. We've asked for this in the
Okay.
other applications where we've said, please number the slips so we know,
But
how many there
this
are.
goes,
That's all. That, it's a simple.
yeah, there was a previously approved one. We'll just get that amended. That's,
For their own business operation, they probably want to do that anyway.
But I understand your question.
Yeah.
You make it go away because it's in the open.
yeah, it's kind of like
Yeah.
the bar stools, right? I know it's not a lot of, flow that we're talking about in difference, but the bar is still there.
Yeah.
So they're saying they're removing the bar stools. Now,
Or you leave
Or
the
they could
stools,
put
but
the
you
stool,
can't sit in.
the stools, the stools come out only when they're.
So you disagree then?
If you were to open a bar, I think you would do it that way.
They demonstrate, they show a plan, they demonstrate
No,
compliance.
I
You want
don't
more?
disagree at all. I think, and I'm not even going for any specific requirements that they make. I'm just stating this for purposes of highlighting the fact that sometimes and I've seen this with other applications and other establishments, that what the planning board approves sounds great, it's fine, but then what happens in practicality is, and then it becomes an enforcement thing.
That's exactly right.
It
And,
does.
and I don't know, and I don't know if there's anything that we could do, for instance, in this case, with the bar stools. And again, it's not a big deal in this case, but.
I mean, maybe I can offer a little more comfort in that. So there's 4 bar stools on the original plan. That was the entire bar. Now they're just moving that side. So they're just eliminating the concept of having seating at the bar. So it's not an amount of like counting, oh, there's 4 people sitting at the bar versus 6. They're just eliminating the concept of having seats at the bar. So.
But I
But
guess.
you can't stop it. It's a code enforcement issue.
Yeah,
All of
it
our
really is.
applications
Yeah,
are
and
code
code
enforcement
enforcement
issues.
is so
They all are.
over.
And you know, I'm glad you mentioned that because it needs to be understood, you know, that we're not code enforcement. You know, we may set a standard, we may set the way something is supposed to look and be. And a year later or a month later, people who are running whatever particular operation they're running just don't play by the rules.
But
that we established.
I think that you're right, but I think we should keep in mind that code enforcement is overtaxed. We should also keep in mind that there are applications that bend the rules. So that sometimes we give leeway and we're more flexible than maybe we should be. And maybe we should be more rigid, knowing that if we're not, those rules are going to be broken. And code enforcement, it cannot do anything
But
about
I
it.
do think Ian's right. It's a numbers game, right? So what can we do?
And
If they
we
can demonstrate this many seats, this many-
people are gonna break.
Right, that's.
They might break the law, but if we say,
That's the.
oh, well, if they break the law, it's gonna be bad.
We have to work in a kind of an idealistic.
It's like
Milieu.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if we're going to make determinations based on what we think the way the world operates, and maybe even we're right that the world operates that way, then we're not creating consistent decisions. And every time we come to a decision point, we're going to say, well, is this one really going to be followed? And you just can't do that. You've got to assume. But go ahead and do that, but then we got to finish the
I
application.
understand, but this is something no one's talked about. Because the phases of this application, which was approved in 2018, I think before the low nitrogen regulations went into effect, has the upgrade to the sanitary system as phase 2. And I wonder if the applicant would merge that into phase 1 if we're taking another view of this, because I think it would address a lot of the questions that, the concerns that we have about overcrowding and septic use, and there are, there are grant programs that, would help support that.
Yeah, so I mean, the conversion regarding the apartment and the dining seats are both part of the same phase as the septic, so they can't do that stuff without doing the septic, even though it's in phase 2. But so, I mean, it was approved as a phase 1 and phase 2. But currently the new owner is looking to get everything done as soon as possible. So
that includes
it's not, yeah, I mean, he doesn't have plans to do phase 1 and then just sit on it. Like he wants to get everything,
I'm just,
everything done.
I think if people knew a low nitrogen system was going in, it might, solve some of the concerns about whether people are standing at the bar or sitting at the bar, or there's X here and X there, that, our basic concern is the septic. It's the, it's sewage.
So, I mean, the way, I guess I'm not sure what exactly you'd be asking for, because the way it is now, we can't do any of that stuff until we upgrade the system. So it stands that way now.
Even though it's in phase 2,
and you do
as a practical matter, it's phase.
Because the restaurant and the apartment are in phase 2 also.
You do both phases.
Just so it's stated. Yeah. But
And this was also a number of years ago with a different owner, so.
I just wanted to affirm that.
Yeah, no, but I'm giving comfort, by what we're being told.
Yes, me too.
All right, so should the planning board require a new site plan to be submitted outlining parking calculations for the boat slips and sanitary calculations for the new proposed outdoor seating?
Yes.
Yes, all around on that?
Yes.
There's your numbers. Should the planning board request written confirmation or documentation of the pending Suffolk County Department of Health Services approval regarding the amended proposal?
Yes.
Yes on that. Thank you. Yes, approved. Should the applicant be allowed to retain the existing second-story apartment for managerial use, converting less space than originally proposed to storage?
Yes. Yeah, as long as it's in the flow plan.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Natty.
And we are on to East Hampton Oyster Preliminary. Oyster. And Eric, that's yours. Kathy, that's yours. The applicant I see there. Thank you. Go right ahead.
This is mine.
Okay.
This is a preliminary site plan application to add a mariculture use in the form of 5 floating upweller systems, 18 floating cages, and 200 hanging lantern mesh beds for oyster cultivation. Also proposed is a new roughly 2,500 square foot footprint, 2-story combination pool deck and storage sheds, and a roughly 250 square foot tool shed adjacent to an existing pool, as well as to add a retaining wall and drainage. That small shed is next to an existing tennis court, and also to add a walkway, retaining wall, and drainage for the tennis court, and to legalize 2 patios. Although these details may need to be confirmed, it appears that the property currently contains 1 single-family residence, 3 cottages, as they're defined in the CO, and a 20-slip marina use and various accessory structures. The property is situated on 3 Mile Harbor Road in Springs. It's zoned A residence, and it is entirely surrounded by residential property. And I will shortly have the aerial for you. The first issue here, again, this is a preliminary site plan application, which means a one-time review of basically the general concept that the applicant is proposing. It is, to be distinguished from a formal site plan application. So the first major issue I think here is the number of uses on the site. The CO isn't very clear as to what identifying what uses exist on site. It identifies the structures. That's often the case, unfortunately. It does identify a single family residence. Again, as I said before, cottages. We don't know whether or not that means a motel or a resort or 3 single family residences. And then there are 20 boat slips identified. We would assume that means a recreational marina, although again, that's not specifically stated in the CO. So if there is a recreational marina here, that's a commercial use. That makes this a commercial property, is the same as defined. Although it is zoned residential, once you have a commercial use on a property, your commercial property, because you have a commercial enterprise, that may not be and then additionally, if there is a motel or resort use here representing the cottages, that would be another commercial use, also further making this commercial property. However, it could be deemed a residential property if there is no marina. If there's only single family residences as defined on the property, then it would be a residential property. You may want to go upon formal, you probably need to go to the building inspector to determine that issue. However, it may be moot. If this is commercial property, then you're only allowed a maximum of 2 uses. If they have a recreational marina and a single family residence, irrespective of whether or not there's also a motel and resort for the cottages, they're adding mariculture. It is a use that is allowed by special permit on this property. However, once you go to 3 uses, you need a multiple business complex approval. That is prohibited in the A residence zoning district. So they would need a use variance for a multiple business complex. If it's residential property, you're only allowed 1 use, and it looks like they have a marina use and a single family residence use. Even if they don't have the marina use, they have a single family residence use, and they're asking for a mariculture use. So you would need a variance from the allowable number of uses. So that's the main overarching issue with the proposal. I went into, to honor the applicant's request for the preliminary review. The memo does go into some detail about all of the different implications of the code. However, I'll summarize that because I think that really that issue of the number of uses and the use definitions is going to change those other factors quite substantially. So there's no narrative or detailed narrative submitted. You would obviously request that at the time of a formal application. The information included would be numbers of employees, daily vehicular trips, hours of operation. Oyster cultivation is obviously a unique, although intrinsic part of East Hampton's culture. But you'd probably want to get information on the quantity of oysters that were being farmed, storage needs and capabilities, any potential discharge of water. Once you've received that, there's a number of other entities that you would consult with: the aquaculture department, the trustees, the harbor master, the DEC. There are no specific special permit standards for mariculture, but we did attach here the general special permit standards. And one thing just to point out is that we would assume that there would probably be a need for a lot of storage on the site. If I probably should have done this earlier, but if I zoom into the property, you can see there's vast areas of lawn there, and basically, I guess I'll point out too that the without going too far into this, but there's the cottages are over here. Those are the cottages and residents. This is the tennis court. They're proposing to legalize a shed that's right here. And then the boat slips obviously are located on the dock here. But anyway, getting back to this, we would assume that there would be a need for a lot of outdoor storage for the floats, the traps, the baskets, things of that sort. That's something that should be included in the formal application. The swimming pool that's proposed, I won't get into in too much detail here.
Show us where it is proposed.
Yeah, I will. And I'll show you the visual rendering too. Just got it. Exactly. Okay, so I guess I got to move it here. Staring at it. The swimming pool, it's this sort of odd looking thing here. It's tough to see on it's tough to kind of get an idea of what they're proposing by looking at the site plan because the overhead is a little odd. This is basically a two-story structure where you'd have sort of three independent first story additions, and then there would be a second story deck that has a second story swimming pool, which is shown here. But the elevation plan actually, elevation rendering, I should say, that the applicant submitted.
The pool is
A second story pool?
It's a second
Yes,
story.
yeah, well, going into, so, yeah, the picture will show it a little better.
I think there are.
I didn't see one.
There are elevations. I saw elevations somewhere.
Yeah, so here you go.
Yeah, there it is.
This is what they submitted. So you can see it's basically sort of
Maybe a shadow.
three segmented first story additions, and then decking with an overhang above it, and then the pool is on that second story.
The pool's covered.
Yes.
Solar panels, looks like. I'm guessing.
That's what's
Yeah.
actually happens on the first level.
The pool's not covered, I don't think.
No,
Oh, you're right,
no,
it
it's
is.
just a little awning kind of, yeah, like a, whatever you call those things.
It's a deep pool.
Water, no, it's a
Yeah.
waterfall. It's a waterfall.
So, I mean, there's an obvious thing here. On a residential property, accessory structures are limited to 600 square feet. The footprint of this is about 2,500 square feet. Clearly, they segmented the first floor addition so that they would be not exceed 600 square feet. The code was actually very recently just changed to change what's deemed a separate structure and what connections you can do. We'll get into that upon formal application. However, if this is actually a commercial property, there is no limitation on the size of accessory structures. So in theory, they wouldn't have to abide by that. But again, that's something that we probably need more information and that could be addressed upon the formal application. The wetland boundary will need to be updated. We'll need a new lot inspection to determine if, well, there certainly will be a natural resources special permit required and potentially variances. I won't get into the minutia of there's a number of discrepancies between what accessory structures have approval, the number of boat slips on the property, what the existing clearing and allowable clearing is on the property. A lot of that stuff is stuff that we would have to work out with the building department upon a formal application. Parking, As with any site plan, upon a formal site plan application, we'd want to see parking calculations. We just listed what the requirements are under the code in the memo. If a new sanitary system is proposed for the pool building, then it would have to be a low nitrogen system. I don't believe they're proposing one right now. The mariculture use is not going to have any principal structure, but that would be determined at formal also. We'd like to see a comprehensive site drainage plan upon formal. Noise, if there's any generators, pool equipment, anything of that sort, that information should be submitted upon formal site plan. Same with a comprehensive lighting and landscaping plan. And then we just made a notation about the title of plans, which is standard. So in conclusion, again, this is a preliminary site plan application. This is basically your opportunity to give the applicants initial feelings, concerns about the general concept of the plan. So hopefully I've addressed the key issues that we can see at this time. Again, there was somewhat limited information submitted, but I will yield to the applicant.
Very much.
So I'm just here to clarify the uses that are on site now, which we will also be presenting to Ann Glennon for clarification. So basically the house and the cottages and the marina all predate zoning. I've done an extensive amount of research recently because the CO does not adequately address any of this. It says it's a single family residence with 3 cottages, a swimming pool and a tennis court and a shed. It doesn't say anything about the marina. It doesn't say anything about how the cottages are used. They've been consistently rented out as a motel. So those 3 cottages are a motel use. The house is a residential use. The marina is a different commercial use, which importantly to know is to be extinguished as the oyster mariculture takes over. So they're going to be getting rid of the marina slips. They've already actually ejected some of their commercial tenants. They're going to keep 8 slips for the mariculture use and convert and get rid of the marina entirely. So the mariculture isn't really a commercial use. I don't know how Ann's going to qualify it, but I'm going to have to go to her first before we come to you with a formal. And that should at least clarify what I think will be most of the questions coming from the board, unless there's anything else.
Okay.
And we did make a new wetlands flagging application.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. Well, thanks for that. This is, there's a lot going on here. And I think that it would help us, you just did, sort of made a few sentences, and I think if you would capture in a narrative, describing that the mariculture use is going to replace the boat slips and all the rest, that we could have an actual assessment of everything that's on the site. I know it's been challenging to find a legitimate certificate of occupancy, but we need a better understanding of how all these things relate to one another. I take the view that this is it's zoned residential, and I understand that there are commercial operations on it, but to me, the commercial operations are pre-existing non-conforming. And it feels to me like this is an expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use on a residential lot in a harbor protection overlay district, which is designated to maintain or improve surface water quality in East Hampton's major harbors, creeks, and ponds, including, and then there's a whole list, and also to help prevent the entry of stormwater runoff into the town's waters, gradually require the upgrading of outmoded or inoperable septic systems, preserve important indigenous vegetation, reduce impacts from residential and commercial swimming pools, and upgrade standards for fuel storage tanks. East Hampton's waterways are among the town's most prized features. They support bountiful shellfish and finfish resources, offer prime habitat for local wildlife and other residents and visitors, a place to swim, hunt, fish, boat, observe wildlife, and enjoy scenic beauty and tranquility. Tranquility is missing, isn't it? The overlay district will help preserve these important benefits for future generations. So I take the Harbor Protection Overlay District criteria very seriously with respect to this application. It's, and we can have the discussion here, but to my mind, it's zone residential, has commercial use on it, pre-existing non-conforming. This is an expansion of that use. We can discuss what we think about that. But I don't think that this is a commercial property. And the depth of water table is 9.1 feet. which is shallow, that's not very much. The stormwater runoff, I mean, it's great that they would be proposing a new septic system. But I'm unwilling to have the building inspector give us any feedback until we have the narrative and know exactly how these buildings relate to one another and how this use is proposed, with what's being proposed. So I think, I recognize and respect the preliminary review process. And I'm glad that, Lori came in, represented the client, and talked about this, and Eric did a very thorough examination. But to my mind, we're at a roundabout here, and there are a bunch of places we could turn off, and we won't know which way to turn until we have a clearer understanding in terms of the narrative. So I recognize that might have been impossible to provide until very recently, but I really think that we have to start there and then go forward. That's my feeling.
I concur with that. It's, this is a big proposal, and just as you come to us for guidance, is a preliminary site plan, this particular time, I think we need a little guidance from you. So, or a little direction as to where you want to be. And then we can give you the guidance. So let's do a little push me, pull you, and come back with a narrative that covers the areas that are in these questions. I'm going to run through the questions.
Well, this application, though, this is only a one-time deal, so I think we should give, I don't have great guidance either, but I think we should give all that we have, because if we ask for a narrative, we can't do anything with it. This is the only time, unless they submit a formal proposal.
Well,
so we can say that would be a big part of it.
Right.
Well, I think that it would be helpful to give for feedback from each member. I mean, just because that's what the whole point of it is. Sure. But,
I look, we can do that, certainly. I don't know how much value it's going to have at this stage of the game. Because, if you follow the questions, what information should be submitted regarding the nature of the proposed maricultural use? Should equipment and staging and storage areas related to maricultural use be added to the site plan? That's kind of weird. And then there's questions about, pertaining to the site plan elements that we need to address, or that the applicants will need to address. All right, I suppose we can go around the table on it. If you want to provide whatever input might be available, might be of use to the applicant. Yeah. I'm just concerned that I don't want the applicant to get information that's not helpful.
I think honestly, the purpose of submitting a preliminary is to get the comprehensive review that was offered by the planner. I don't think you have enough information to give us advice. I think we need information from Ann Glennon before any of us can figure out what we're dealing with and what animal this is. That's the most important thing that came out of the preliminary review, which is where we're headed next. Our formal application will be with the answer from Ann Glennon.
Well, the only thing I would.
Kathy.
No, I just feel, I feel like I'm not ready to consult Ann about whether she thinks this is a commercial. I mean, I still, this is a residentially zoned piece of property, and until we know what other uses are going on there, I don't want to ask Ann to come in and weigh in, because we need a more comprehensive overview.
I've already prepared my request to her to actually determine what are.
Right, but we would do that. The planning board would do that.
I need to know too. I can't do my job without it.
So the applicant is free, they haven't submitted an application,
No, you're right.
formal application.
Right.
So they're free to submit whatever they want. And, if the board has further questions about what, sometimes Ann will send us something and it won't have necessarily every question answered. Then the board can request further interpretation. But since they haven't submitted anything formally yet, they're within their rights to go to Ann and try to get something.
Yeah, because we've changed the way we do things regarding requests to Ann, but that's in the context of site plan application. So.
Good.
I was going to say something similar, which I do think we should write Ann a letter to say we're looking at this. Here are some concerns, because I think that the whole point was to make sure that we get to frame the question before the answer comes back and sort of misses the mark potentially by her not getting the information that we have.
Yeah, but there's nothing formally before the board yet as far as a full site plan application. And
feel exactly the same way, but
any person can go to the building inspector and ask a question about their property.
Right.
You know, so we can't really tell them they can't do that until the planning board writes a letter when there's no application pending.
And we can't make an application without the information from the.
Does she give a written determination then on that?
Well, I think what she gives the applicant, you know, will be helpful for them and possibly helpful for the board. The board can review it and decide either, yes, this is helpful, this, you know, fully determines the issue for us, or we'd like more information, you know, a further narrative, whatever, and ask the question to Ann ourselves.
Right. The whole reason we changed the policy was because the questions that were being presented to the building department which was basically done by the applicant, wasn't responsive to the concerns of the board, or weren't responsive to the concerns, too often. Too often.
More often.
So but that was, we wanted to rein in that process so that we controlled the flow of questioning. Council's absolutely right.
That was in the
no application.
Yeah, that was in the context of, so what was happening is we would have a formal application, then the applicant, then we would need, the board would say that it needs an interpretation from Ann. The applicant would write the interpretation in a way that possibly could lead to an answer or confuse Ann. And then the board would get frustrated because it was stuck with whatever. And, you know, in this situation, whatever Lori submits with their formal application is not something the board is necessarily stuck with. Now, it should be something that it reviews because it is from the building inspector, but if the board has further questions about it or wants clarification, it can go back.
So it doesn't count as a formal determination then?
I mean, it counts in the way that it's Ann's opinion, you know, yeah, that it, I mean, if it's
opinion is more than advice when we ask her.
Well, yeah, if the board has further questions, the board can ask the question in the context of a formal application where, you know, the board is asked and Ann gives an answer. It's really hard to go back, but here there's no application pending. It's a different situation.
And she's going to be, the applicant's going to be coming back to us with a narrative and with a more formal application.
No, I get it, but that, and I respect.
I understand what you're saying. It's going to be.
That's awfully similar to the situation we've been trying to prevent. That's all.
Well, not necessarily because it's in a different context. And you know, we get back in something in if the building department says that a certain use is being performed there, then, you know, we'll be able to investigate and inquire with that.
Sure, but sometimes when the building inspector has determination, the right way to, you know, object to that is to object, and the zoning board then makes a determination. I'm not sure if this type of advice rises to that level or doesn't. It sounds like it doesn't, and that's.
I understand your point, and I take your point completely, but I just think in this instance, because this is a preliminary review.
No. I'm certainly not arguing with it.
We're a site plan application, you know, so
certainly
that's why I asked for the narrative, so that we could all respond to it and then maybe send that, you know, that would inform
our questions would be different.
Exactly.
Yeah, or, you know, can we just ask Lori, obviously you have some sense for what the owner's intention is with this, right?
I actually know the historical uses of the property. I know the historical, I've done significant research on this, the historical use.
Right, but I'm just saying, you know, to propose a mariculture operation and a 2,500 square foot pool building with a tennis court.
Yep.
I mean.
Tennis court is for the residences, pool buildings for the residences.
Rural.
We're eliminating the marina, so there's no one else on the property, certainly your mariculture.
And the motel use.
That's for the residences. Yeah, the motel use are 5 bedrooms in 3 cottages, and there's a single family residence with a family living in it. The pool and the tennis court are for them only, not for the mariculture use. Marina is being eliminated.
Okay. So the idea is it's a resort use, a motel use, a hotel use, and a mariculture use, basically.
Correct.
That's sort of the intention.
And a residence.
And a residence.
Three is.
And a residence. Okay, well, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, my only advice, Lori, would be to lay it all out there with Ann.
Yeah.
So that what she hears from you and comes back to you is something that we could use.
I plan on sharing everything I share with her with you. I was online all day looking up historical references to this property, and there are plenty.
Yeah.
So you've gotten what you need from us in terms of preliminary
She really didn't want.
Yeah, no, she.
No, that's not true. I mean, I know the answers to the questions. I know you're gonna want landscaping and lighting.
Yeah,
and
you've been,
drainage.
you've been to the rodeo before.
Yes, every one of the questions at the end. I don't need you to poll everyone.
No,
I know that.
Thank
I
you.
know what a formal application looks
Thank you for
like.
saving us the time, yes.
No, but it is a preliminary site plan application to the planning board. It's not to the planning department. And so the purpose in the code of a preliminary site plan is for the applicant to get some indication from the planning board and the department about a reaction. It's not supposed to be just a memo from the.
I think the
planning board.
reaction is, we need more.
Yeah, we need.
I think that's really the most.
We have no idea where to go.
Yeah, because it's not enough. I mean,
Yeah.
But I think the interesting element here is, I think she doesn't care what we say. She just wanted this report from Eric.
No, that's not true, but I understand that you don't have enough information to give me advice.
But you did kind of say that.
She could have gone to Ann Glennon without doing a preliminary, right? She could have just talked to her and gotten her. So the question is, can we, since she really didn't need our advice, can we go to Ann Glennon anyway? And like, for instance, Kathy has a very logical, strong point about that this is a residential property with a pre-existing commercial use. If you expand the commercial use, then on a residential property, that's a whole different ballpark. So can we give that point of view to Ann Glennon voluntarily? Not because the applicant is asking for it or because it's in the code that we need to do that. Can we?
Well, we
I'd
have
be
an
wary.
application.
She needs to
We'd
make
have to
that
have an
determination.
application.
We have, but see, we have a preliminary application. We have a planning department memo. I don't see why we can't ask the building department for guidance.
There's
No, I was saying to
But a
give.
formal is gonna might be
give the-
different than this.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Formal
why
might-
she's here.
Lou, I mean, I don't know if this relays your fears, but I fully intend to talk to Ann about it.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah, and I think a formal could be so different. We've had preliminaries that come back. and
Absolutely.
That's right.
they're different.
I think it's an opportunity for us to help shape what's going forward.
I agree.
And I agree with Kathy. She was generous, and Eric, you guys, when you wrote 9.1 feet to groundwater, but the elevations on the site range from 3.5 to 9.2. So that's the depth of the groundwater at the absolute highest point of the lot. In the floodplain, it's over cleared by current standards already. When we see the septic flows, they're going to be over. So my initial reaction is it's somewhat overdeveloped already, and I don't see how you're going to add any more intensity to this site. That's my initial reaction.
Take that.
No, but like,
Well, you see, but that goes to the point that's, it isn't just about getting the planning department's memo. There may have been a comment to that effect. The point is that, and I agree, this is an opportunity for us to chime in. So I don't want anyone sitting at this table to feel reluctant to tell the applicant what they think of this application in the state that it is now, but recognize that information that we provide is going to inform whatever actual site plan application is received by us. So with that, does anybody wish to continue and provide more input to the applicant?
I think that's a very good point for the swimming pool, for sure.
Yeah,
I
think it's 20 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound bag.
sorry, I didn't hear the
I said, I think-
swimming pool comment.
Well, the swimming pool seemed big, but I said it, yeah, we did. I just feel like it's 20 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound bag. It's just too much for what's there.
Okay, so, I mean, we're eliminating marina use, so that's 28 cars that are not coming on site every day. I will address how many trucks will be coming to the site to take away the.
You're not really eliminating it. You've got 9 slips left.
We're gonna keep 8 slips for the,
Yeah,
But
but
that's
so you
not-
work
you
there.
still have a dock,
yes.
and you still have boats that can tie up, and you still have cars that bring people to the boats. So you're not eliminating it. You're scaling it back.
They're actually eliminating the marina use. That's part of their agreement with the DEC because they're not compatible, the mariculture and the marina use. So the boats
So
are.
it means they're not going to rent out slips.
Correct.
But you're still having a commercial operation that uses boats and parks them in a.
You have to for oyster cultivation.
I just think it's not really completely accurate to say you're eliminating the marina.
Well, we're eliminating the commercial marine use and replacing it with a mariculture use.
Right.
So
But mariculture
swapping out
use.
the uses.
But they look similar is what Randy's saying.
Yeah, some similar.
Well, the impact also, the net
Yes,
impact on the
that's correct.
community, which is the thing that, with which we need to be most concerned, is pretty much, I'm not saying it's identical, but it is a minimal change in that impact, at least.
Yeah, are you fueling the boats there now?
No,
You know,
they don't have any fueling station and they won't for this
is there
operation.
maintenance of boats at
Nope.
the site?
Nothing.
Well, they must be able to, I mean, this will be in the narrative, but you gotta be able to fuel the boats if they're for the.
I think they take them elsewhere and fuel them and take them.
So it's a boat.
But I can address that in the narrative. Okay, fuel have boats. I
It's
get
a
it.
private property that has some boat slips that they rent
Yeah,
out.
I mean, not everybody that has boat slips has fuels, my mother rents
Sure.
boat slips and people go out and get their fuel, they don't
Somewhere else.
sell it, yeah.
Well, I'm not saying sell it. It seems like if it's your business is oyster farming, you might, I have no
You might
idea.
have- yes.
A narrative would be
I get
important,
it.
but I agree with Randy that the pool seems problematic. Seems like a tough sell, looking at that, and
Because of the size of it or?
because of the size, it sure seems like a residential property that's pre-existing non-conforming with some commercial uses or a commercial use. It seems like that might have been designed with that in mind, and I don't think it seems like it probably meets the current code, trying to prevent adjoining smaller structures into like a bigger one, because by appearance, that looked like one structure.
Right, and it is one structure right now because of the way the deck is one roof.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that would be a tough sell for me. Mariculture, I fully support. I know a little bit about mariculture, not much. 8 slips seems like a lot for
Okay.
just for that, but that would be in the narrative, and I would want to hear more about that. But I think that, I mean, on the face of it, if you truly convert a marina to mariculture, like, that's a positive thing, but it has to make sense, I think, with the type of operation you're proposing. So that's my only 2 cents.
Anybody else have 2 cents?
Well, one other thing is.
We got 5.
Oh, sorry. No, with the mariculture, one of the things that's happening with the mariculture, say at the Devon Yacht Club, is that when they grow out the oysters, they put them on rafts that are moored to the bottom. And most of those projects, they moor to county bottomland and have county leases. So we don't know where these grow out. Where are these
There
growing?
was a narrative provided with that information, so.
Yeah,
It was. So,
Mariculture is a positive. Mariculture is definitely a positive, it's just the applications of the DC and town trustees.
And I think
So more on the bottom at 3 Mile Harbor, is that what you're thinking?
so, yeah, there's 3 Mile Harbors where their cages are gonna be, and then they have their boats with ice, they bring them in, they put them into their mesh bags that hang off of their own docks. So it's a combination of out there and in here.
So are there trustee leases yet?
Trustees are involved, DEC is involved, they're pretty far along with their reviews in terms of.
Let's say where though,
Yeah.
I think I read that. It doesn't say where the rafts are gonna be located.
Yeah, I think that's important, because I know that's one of the problems they've been having over at Devon, is that some of those,
What was the question? Where the what are
Where
located?
the grow out rafts.
cages.
Where the grow out cages are going to be.
Cages are gonna be.
Yep.
But you'll have to have it on the site plan, all of that, I'm sure.
Right, but you'd be surprised at how haphazard some of those approvals are from the county, because I know that that's part of the reason they had so much trouble over at Devon, is there was no coordination there, and it's actually in a active waterway.
Right, exactly. I think isn't there another marina farther down that at the inlet that goes to the
Yes.
southeast? There's another marina
Yes.
So I think
down
all
there.
of
So
that
there's a
has
lot
to
of
be
boating
taken
happening
into
right there.
consideration,
Yeah.
Cove.
Yeah.
That is Sunset Cove.
Oh, that's Sunset Cove?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sunset Cove.
So
Correct.
Folkestone.
That's it.
Yeah,
that one. Yeah, that's the one. My feeling is it's a really intensive expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use in a place that's, at a low-lying place in a floodplain in a residential zone. And I don't yet really understand the connection between these modest cottages and a modest residence and a massive pool building and a huge, regulation tennis court and a maritime operation. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't really tie together. I don't really see how that.
The tennis court and the cottages and the house all predate zoning. They're there before the adoption of zoning.
Okay, but that means that's your starting point.
Right.
And then you're adding to that and adding to that.
Well, taking away the pre-existing marina and adding the mariculture.
No, that's a question. Yeah, okay. But you still have.
Well, and adding the
still have a tennis court, you still have residents.
When you say the expansion of the pre-existing use, do you mean the pool? I've heard that term 3 times and I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, in particular, the pool.
The pool.
Yeah.
Would be the expansion of.
Well, that's a 2,500 square foot footprint.
Yeah.
That building, it's huge, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
25.
And that.
That's not a whole structure.
You consider that expansion of the pre-existing motel or expansion of the.
Well, you said it's the residents.
Is it a personal pool?
No, it's for all the people.
Oh, it's for the-
So it's part of the resort.
When I look at the advertising for this resort, I see that they offer the tennis court as an amenity. The pool would be the same thing.
So that's a question for Ann ultimately.
It is.
And hopefully we get to ask her.
Because the resort use is pre-existing.
Well, you see, that's
Right, but it's
really
an
good point.
expansion of
The
that.
point
That's,
is that
we're in agreement on that, right? Yeah.
we're gonna have to ask that question. Ian does raise a good point.
Once, there's no formal application for the board. There's
Trigger for
there's
that.
nothing to ask Ann right now. The applicant, any person can walk into the building inspector now and get an opinion on anything they want. Once it comes before the board, the board can look at that opinion and look at the narrative and ask Ann to clarify any questions that are remaining. That's completely within the board's, purview once there's a formal application. But right now there's not, and there's no trigger to go to Ann.
So I think we fulfilled our mission here.
That's my way. Have you received enough?
Sounds like more.
Does anyone else have anything they wish to add? Randy? Does anyone have anything else you would like to impart to the applicant on this? No?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you, Lori. Now, Lori, stick around for a second. You're involved with Ruddy, right? Okay. I would like to, as chair, do an audible. We've got these, and Marco, I'm sorry, don't smack me around for this. It's 9:30 at night. We've been at this for 3 hours. These are zoning changes. I think it would be for the benefit of everybody if we put these on for another day, because, I take zoning changes very seriously. And we might just say, yeah, sure, fine, no problem. Or we might have a more fulsome discussion. So I'd like to put this to another date and table both of these zoning changes.
So I'll be on something else for the first meeting in September. If you'd like to put it on that one, that would be great.
That's okay with me, if it's okay with you.
Great.
Okay, all right, so well, thank you for that.
Thanks.
We appreciate
Thanks very much.
Second sense table.
All in favor?
No, I get you. So I know we took on a very ambitious agenda tonight. We had a lot of items that were, older and more complicated, and I'm glad we cleared them up. But that having been said, sometimes you take dessert and you put dessert on the shelf and you have it tomorrow morning. It is now. I note that all the candy is now gone.
Motion to adjourn?
It's 9:32. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.